I bought a strange glass box on the side of the road. Inside, I discovered something impossible. A miniature cultivation world was living right there. I dropped a random lobster into the box. To them, it was a great demon that shook the very foundations of their world. A tiny toy sword I tossed and became something else entirely. It transformed into a divine weapon capable of sealing the earth. In their eyes, I am a god, the supreme being who dominates the ages, but they have no idea. I'm just a cancer patient with less than 3 months to live. After ordering a $300 lobster for them to eat, I began to study the projection of the glass box. I flipped the switch and started the operation. Immediately, a vast desert appeared before me. I spotted a tiny figure moving through the sand. I grabbed a magnifying glass to get a better look at her. It was a young woman, her body covered in deep wounds. 2 black wolves were closing in on her. The beasts were fierce, hungry, and relentless in their pursuit. The girl pointed her weapon back in a desperate, final stand. A flying sword transformed into a streak of light and lunged at the 2 black wolves. But they dodged it easily, lunging forward to pin the young woman down. The projection was too realistic. I couldn't stand watching them tear into her. I remembered what the old man said about being able to interact with this world. I reached over and grabbed 2 ordinary toothpicks. I dropped them through the top of the glass box, aiming right for those wolves. The toothpicks fell from the heavens like divine pillars toward the beasts. To those creatures, these were weapons the likes of which the world had never seen. The wolves were only a few millimeters long, and they were skewered instantly. Hahu Kingen stood there in shock, frantically scanning the desolate wasteland. She didn't have much time to think, so she moved quickly. She sat down to meditate, focusing her energy to heal her wounds. After 15 minutes of cross-legged meditation, Kingen managed to regain some strength. She walked up to the 2 massive wooden pillars I had dropped. She tossed the dead demon wolves aside and trembled. A chill ran down her spine as she realized this power belonged to a great being. Kingen, a disciple of the Kingle sect, bowed her head low. I thanked the senior for his life-saving grace, she called out, but I didn't answer. While she waited in silence for the great senior to speak, I was busy opening my front door to pick up my $300 lobster delivery. I looked at the time. It was getting late. I needed to focus back on the box. I walked back into the room carrying that box of luxury prawns. I was just about to dig in when something caught my eye. The young woman in the glass box was still kneeling before the toothpicks, muttering something. I leaned in slowly to get a better look. Finally, I could hear her words clearly. Thank you, great senior, for your divine intervention. Please, senior, reclaim your magic treasures before they are seized by outsiders. Magic treasures? I looked at the 2 toothpicks and scoffed. The interactive effects of this projection were truly incredible. It was like the plot was generating itself in real time. I ignored her plea and took a bite of my food while watching her. Even at that tiny scale, she was undeniably beautiful. Hahu Kingen waited anxiously, pacing circles around the massive toothpicks. Suddenly, her legs gave out and she collapsed helplessly onto the dirt. She hadn't eaten in half a month, and her cultivation was only at the 13th level of chi refining. She wasn't strong enough to survive on spiritual energy alone yet. Her eyes drifted toward the mangled corpse of the demon wolf. To stay alive, Kingen was willing to do whatever it took. She cut a piece of the wolf meat and forced it into her mouth. The stench was so foul she nearly gagged, but she swallowed it to survive. I watched the scene, completely stunned by the realism. On a whim, I gently placed a piece of my lobster claw next to the tiny girl. The massive, fire-red object slammed into the ground right in front of her. The entire floor of the box trembled from the impact. She froze, staring up at the giant red mountain I'd just dropped. What kind of demonic beast is this? She stammered. Hahu Kingen looked around frantically, searching for the source of the gift, but she saw nothing but the empty air of her world. Then it clicked. The great senior had returned to help her again. Just smelling the fragrance of the lobster made her feel her strength returning. Tentatively, she summoned her flying sword to cut a piece of the meat. The blade struck the shell with a sharp, metallic ring. To her horror, her flying sword shattered instantly upon impact. The lobster shell didn't even have a single scratch on it. Kingen stared at the shards of her weapon in total disbelief. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized her only treasure was gone. Her master had spent every penny of the sect's savings to forge that sword. I watched her reaction with a grin, thinking, those 800 yuan were totally worth it. I watched the little girl's face as she teetered on the edge of tears. The realism was staggering, so I decided to crack that claw open for her. I wanted to see exactly how this tiny person would react. I reached in and pulled back the shell. Hahu Kingen heard a sound and lifted her head in confusion. She saw a massive, golden hand descending from the void of the sky. It gripped the indestructible claw and cracked it open with a thunderous snap. Then, the golden hand slowly vanished into thin air. Kingen's mind was a complete chaotic mess. She knew the senior was powerful, but this was beyond her imagination. Staring at the succulent white meat, she couldn't hold back any longer. She began to gorge herself, completely forgetting her refined image. Watching her eat so voraciously actually made my own appetite improve. But then, I noticed something that felt very wrong. Why was the actual lobster meat inside my box getting smaller? If this was just a projection, why was the physical food disappearing? I looked down at the 2 toothpicks stained with sandwolf blood. No, this is too much. Have my cancer cells metastasized to my brain? I rubbed my head, wondering if I was just having a vivid hallucination. I decided to test my theory and began scanning the rest of the box. I scanned the landscape presented inside the glass box. The view always seemed to center on that young girl. I couldn't see anything beyond a certain distance. Could this projection only show the area within 300 meters of her? Suddenly, I saw the ground shifting in a very treacherous way. Something was tunneling toward the girl from beneath the earth. I shouted a warning. Watch out. Kingen, who had been completely distracted, jumped at the sound. She heard my voice, grabbed her broken sword, and looked toward the sky. Then she began scanning her surroundings with extreme caution. She looked off into the distance. Yellow sand was kicking up into the air. Something was tearing through the ground toward her. It was moving fast. It turned out to be a desert sandworm. Aren't these things usually dormant? Why did it wake up now? Wait a second. Kingen seemed to realize something. She looked back at the bright red lobster claw behind her. She hesitated for 1 second, and the sandworm burst from the earth. The 20-meter-long desert beast was already on top of her, unhinging its fanged maw. Kingen gripped her weapon tight. She took that broken flying sword and lunged forward to strike first. The sandworm clearly didn't take her seriously, a fatal mistake. Half of Kingen's shattered blade buried itself directly into the creature's brain. The beast shrieked in agony, twisting its massive body wildly. Watching the chaos unfold, my anxiety spiked. Suddenly, my eyes landed on the lighter sitting on my table. I moved fast and grabbed it. I pulled the lighter apart to get to the internal mechanism. I held the small piezoelectric igniter in my hand. I shouted again, "Get back." Kingen heard my voice echoing through the air once more. She let the force of the worm's thrashing launch her body away. She cleared the area just in time. The world inside the box shifted instantly. The clear sky vanished, replaced by a demonic, howling wind. Black clouds swirled violently, blotting out the sun entirely. The massive sandworm froze. It looked up at the darkening heavens in pure horror. The creature trembled all over, desperate to escape the energy gathering in the sky. But the heavens gave it no chance during those terrifying seconds. A massive ocean of electricity tore through the clouds. It split the world in two, crashing down on the desert sandworm with zero restraint. The dark clouds scattered instantly, and the sun returned to the land. As the light hit the ground, a deep, charred crater revealed the horror of my strike. I saw that the tiny beast had been crushed to death. I breathed a sigh of relief, glad I finally saved this little person. Kingen looked up and whispered, "Thank you so much. Great Elder, thank you for saving my life. A mere junior like me has no way to repay such a debt. But if the Elder has any request, I will surely answer it." I leaned over the box and asked, "Is everything okay?" "Yes, everything is fine now," she replied, still shaken. I remembered her broken weapon and asked, "Do you have any flying swords left?" She looked down at the shards of her previous blade. "That one was destroyed, but I have a practice set my master gave me. Does the Elder need them?" "Yes," I said. "Give them to me." Kingen scrambled to find something she could offer to the sky. She reached into her storage bag and pulled out a bundle of wooden flying swords. She carefully planted the sword into the ground. "Elder, this is a practice flying arrow made by my master, engraved with sword control formations and spirit stones. Even commoners can use it to practice the art of sword control," Kingen explained earnestly. I looked at the flying arrow, which was thinner than a single brush hair. Picking it up with my bare hands was out of the question, so I carefully lowered my tweezers into the glass box. From her perspective, two massive metal pillars suddenly descended from the heavens. I gently plucked the wooden flying arrow right out of the dirt. Kingen watched in confusion, wondering why a great elder like me refused to show my true face. Did I have some unspeakable reason for staying hidden? I focused all my attention on that tiny essence of a weapon. I held the wooden sword up to my eyes and examined it closely in my hand. The world inside this box was definitely real. "Great Elder, may I take this grain of food back? My fellow disciples have been under siege. It's been almost a year. They won't be able to hold out much longer. Tell me everything," I commanded. Kingen respectfully explained that her master had established the kingly sect on this very land. Everything was peaceful until that day. A massive horde of monsters launched a full-scale assault on the kingly sect. The entire sect was now on the brink of total destruction. The sect was nearly wiped off the map. Fortunately, the CU sect from the Great Wastelands joined the fight. Together, they successfully held back the half-monsters, but then things changed. Those half-monsters immediately shifted their tactics. They surrounded the kingly sect, cutting off all resources to starve them out. Kingen was sent out on a desperate mission to find her father. She had to find help, no matter how impossible the search seemed. If help failed, she at least had to bring back supplies. "Take it," I said, gesturing to the grain of rice. "If that isn't enough, I have plenty more right here." This spiritual medicine was bursting with energy, more than enough to sustain them. It could strengthen their bodies, acting just like a high-grade spiritual pill. With this, we finally have enough strength to push those half-demons back. Kingen pulled out a storage bag covered in talismans and aimed it at the massive lobster claw. In an instant, the giant claw vanished into her bag. I blinked, wondering if that tiny bag was already full. "Elder, it's not full yet," she said, looking up at me. I had planned to take the claw out and examine it, but her storage space was surprisingly small. Elder, I am preparing to return to the sect now. Would you like to come and see it for yourself? I shook my head and said, I have other things to do. Let's talk later. In that case, I will head out first, Kingen replied with a bow. The kingly sect will always welcome you, Elder. After she finished speaking, she turned and vanished into the distance. She hurried toward the deeper parts of the farm landscape. I stood outside the house, looking down at the glass box. I watched Kingen move through the miniature world. As she ran, the scenery inside the glass box shifted with her. The view changed constantly, but the focus remained locked on her. Meanwhile, at the foot of the kingly mountain, dark shadows gathered. Flashes of colored light floated around the mountain as volcanoes erupted in the distance. Lightning crackled. The great five-fold thunder formation was holding firm. The demon race couldn't break it, so they settled for a long, grueling siege. In the center of the demon camp, a figure paced back and forth. It was a creature with the head of a wolf and the body of a man. This was Black Wolf, the leader of the half-demon race. I told you from the start, he growled. Resources are vital for our survival. The great wastelands are already barren, yet we still have to fight these humans. We are all starving. If we rob the humans, can we finally become rich? Exactly. We can't keep wasting our strength like this. I don't know if the humans can hold out much longer, but my half-demon kin will definitely suffer the most. Right at that moment, an old man suddenly appeared in the center of the camp and barked, Demons, why haven't you attacked yet? My lord, the great formation is too powerful, Black Wolf replied. We can't break through it. We can only wear them down. I see you're just unwilling, aren't you? The old man sneered. The powerful aura of Elder Eagle Ape crushed the surrounding half-demons, leaving them breathless. The half-demons trembled, wondering how a powerhouse like Elder Eagle Ape had arrived here. Calm yourselves, gentlemen. You have no idea what's happening, the elder said. The other sects fear that after we crush the kingly sect, they'll be next. They've all gathered at the kingly sect now, uniting to resist us. Even though these great wasteland sects are small, their combined power is nothing to sneeze at. Can't we just have peace between everyone? One demon muttered. It doesn't matter, the elder continued. Our grand elder has finally stabilized his condition. Now is the time to free our hands and deal with these disobedient fools. What kind of calamity have I stumbled into? I wondered, why do humans drag us half-humans into their messes? But you're still useful, the elder said. At least you have them trapped here, preventing any escape. Actually, one woman did escape. But don't worry, I've already sent someone to hunt her down and kill her. The old man's eyes widened in shock. He quickly pulled out a drawing and unrolled it. It was a portrait of a woman. It was Hukingen. Is this her? He asked. Yes, that's the one. But right at that exact moment, a small demon wolf scrambled over to report to the demon lord. You were supposed to hunt down her kind, the lord growled. Is she dead? We let her escape, the scout stammered. No, that woman has actually returned. I'm going to kill her myself, the elder barked. Don't let her back inside. With one more step, we'll send that sect master straight to the afterlife. The kingly sect was using every ounce of their strength to break our siege and find help. If they managed to bring back a powerful ally, we'd be in serious trouble. But what power could possibly compare to the Daoxian sect? They were the #1 sect in the Central Lands and leaders of the Orthodox Alliance. How did a tiny sect like Kingly provoke them enough to send a nascent soul expert after a girl? My instincts told me it was better if I didn't know the answer to that. Suddenly, the small wooden sword I had placed on the table began to tremble. It grew steadily until it was 3 feet long and covered in mysterious runes. I quickly snatched the wooden sword as it began to lift into the air. The wooden sword felt unexpectedly light in my grip. It even felt warm to the touch as I held it. I stared at it, wondering exactly how I was supposed to use it. I tried to visualize the stories my son used to tell me. I pictured the sword taking flight, and suddenly, the blade trembled and pulled away. It slid slowly out of my hand and hovered in midair. It glided through the room, following my thoughts with incredible speed. I willed the flying sword back to me, my heart hammering against my ribs. The items from the box actually worked in this world. If I could pull out cultivation medicine, I might actually cure my terminal illness. I forced myself to suppress the excitement surging in my chest. Right now, I needed to confirm one thing above all else. Who exactly was that old man who sold me this box? I washed up quickly and prepared to head into the city. I had to find him. Before leaving, I took one last look at the glass box on the table. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a simple display case. Just an ordinary glass box with a few miniature landscapes inside. A tiny world of miniature messages. I grabbed the wooden sword and walked out the door immediately. I headed straight toward the city. It was just a wooden sword, not a real blade. It wouldn't matter if someone saw me with it on the way. I grabbed 2 random buns for breakfast and headed for the station. Soon, I was standing in the middle of the city's subway system. I carefully adjusted my face mask. I still felt a bit self-conscious carrying a wooden sword this large. The wood looked ordinary, but the runes were another story. The gems embedded in the hilt were far too eye-catching. I noticed several people staring at me. They had been watching me since I bought my breakfast. They looked at me like I was some kind of social outcast. Luckily, it was Sunday, and most people were still home catching up on sleep. The subway car was actually relatively empty. I sat down and waited for my stop. The minutes ticked by slowly. Suddenly, a group of people stepped onto the train. They wore strange clothes and had their hair dyed in neon colors. Some of them were wearing masks just like I was. Except mine was just a cheap, disposable surgical mask. But the masks they were wearing looked way more expensive than mine. Man, wow, that's incredible. That sword is so cool. It must have cost a fortune. I just nodded awkwardly, wondering what character they thought I was. Are they cosplayers? Why don't I recognize the outfit? Is it from a local anime? A college student nearby was staring intensely at the mysterious runes on my wooden sword. Unbelievable, he whispered to himself, his eyes wide with surprise. I sighed quietly, already regretting bringing this sword out in the open. I really should have wrapped it in a cloth or something. It was a harsh reminder that things from the cultivation world don't belong here. Even the most ordinary items from that world are far too advanced for this one. Having something this well-crafted was bound to draw unwanted attention. Luckily, the group of neon-colored strangers was even flashier than I was. Compared to them, my wooden sword actually looked somewhat normal. I stayed silent the whole way, and the college student eventually took the hint. He realized he was being too nosy and finally stopped asking questions. Half an hour later, I reached the area where the woman lived. I had finally made it to the heart of the city center. I hurried toward the spot where I saw the old man's stall yesterday. But when I got there, he was gone, and his stall had vanished with him. I quickly turned to the vendor at the neighboring stall to ask a question. I looked at the owner and asked, "Where's the old man who was right here?" The reality of the situation hit me immediately. The man looked at me and gave a knowing smile. "Young man, you were scammed by that old guy, weren't you? Let me tell you, that old man's son is actually a grave robber. The son digs up the tombs, and the old man handles the selling. I just found out today that the son actually died inside one of them. He was right in the middle of excavating a grave when it happened. The old man went crazy after that, just babbling nonsense. He started putting those things from underground openly on sale at his stall. Every single one of those items was the real deal. The police took them all, and everyone who bought antiques was brought in for questioning. You're the only lucky one because you just bought that glass box. Everyone knows glass is just a product of modern industrial technology. A modern glass box couldn't possibly be an ancient relic. But the truth was, that box was a total disaster. It had been dug up from deep beneath the earth, and according to the rumors, every single person who touched it ended up dead. I realized I didn't have many days left to live. Suddenly, the fear vanished, and I decided to buy something from him. The man pointed toward his stall, and I paused to think for a moment. He had shared so much with me, so I figured I'd support his business. I fixed my gaze on the lasso. It looked like it would be the cheapest thing there. "How much?" I asked, and he replied, "8 yuan. Honestly, sometimes I really feel like calling the police on these vendors. If you keep pricing like this, aren't you afraid of losing customers?" I joked. The man chuckled and pulled a black feathered garment from a box. "Young man, you should buy this feather piece too," he suggested. I looked at him and sighed. "You can't keep taking advantage of me. How much?" "I'll give you 20 for it, since I'm closing up for the day anyway." I was surprised by the offer. I didn't expect him to be so generous. I had assumed this guy was just another problem vendor. I started walking away with a clear conscience when my phone suddenly rang. I checked the screen. It was my cousin, the one who got me my current job. We always stayed in touch and grabbed drinks, but he sounded worried. "I heard you quit and threatened the boss," he said, making me smile. "I have a temporary gig up on Banka Mountain. You should come do it. We'll find some time to talk properly, okay?" he added. Chapter 7. Finding Facian in the Drizzle. I put on the black feathered garment and headed toward the city center. My destination was Banka Mountain. It's the largest peak in all of Tian City, a favorite spot for hikers, with a new landmark sitting right at the summit. The newly built Xianghua Wanshan Temple. Crowds of people flocked there just to burn incense and pray. I kept pushing myself up the mountain path. The trails were narrow and rugged, far from the paved city roads. A never-ending flight of stairs led straight to the temple gates. The terrain was primitive, but the higher I climbed, the more I changed. I didn't feel tired at all. It was as if a strange energy was surging through me. I passed several hikers who had been ahead of me earlier. They stared at me in pure shock as I blew past them. These guys were decked out in the most professional climbing gear money could buy. And yet, there I was, outstripping them on the trail. They were no match for a man in a feather cloak wielding a wooden staff. A few competitive young guys didn't like being shown up by me. They gritted their teeth and tried to pick up the pace. They quickly overtook me, pushing their limits to get ahead. But they didn't realize their strength would fail them soon enough. I quickly closed the gap and surpassed them again. My pace was firm and constant, as if I didn't know the meaning of exhaustion. After leaving those young climbers in the dust, I whispered a light, mocking phrase under my breath. It was enough to make the city-dwelling hikers lose their minds. They were out of breath, but tried to surge forward with everything they had left. But it was no use. I moved with an ease they couldn't comprehend. I glided past them on the right, a blatant taunt to their supposed fitness. I did it again and again. No matter how much effort they put in, they couldn't catch me. They could only watch my back as I ascended toward the summit. Some of the climbers eventually collapsed on the ground like dead dogs. Their muscles were trembling uncontrollably from the strain. I heard one of them gasp, "Is this guy even human?" A few were even wearing action cameras to record their climb. They wanted to capture the freak in the feather cloak who started at the base. But by the time they checked their footage, I was long gone. I had left them all behind halfway up the mountain. My speed was actually increasing as I climbed higher. I felt myself moving faster and faster with every step. One of them gasped, "Is that guy some kind of mountain monk?" They started whispering rumors about monks who could leap from 10-meter cliffs. I thought, "You've clearly been watching too many viral videos. It's just a publicity stunt." Another climber grumbled as he checked his gear. He immediately uploaded his action camera footage with a clickbait title. The video was titled, "The Mystery of Banking Mountain. A chance encounter with a mysterious man in black." He's a monster. I pushed myself to the limit and couldn't even get close. That group belonged to the famous Tian Mountaineering Club. They were ranked among the elite climbers in the entire country. With hundreds of thousands of followers watching, the comments started flooding in. "My God, is this even mountaineering anymore?" one fan wrote. "He was jogging the entire time without stopping. When did humanity evolve again?" I kept moving, silently evolving right past them on the right side of the trail. My face remained expressionless, but inside, I was surging with pure excitement. This was exactly what I had been looking for today. I could feel the aura from the spirit stone radiating through me. The hilt of my wooden flying sword hummed with a constant, restless energy. I finally understand the power of the spirit stone's aura, even though I don't know any formal cultivation languages or techniques. Simply relying on the nourishment of that aura has changed everything. My physical condition has improved beyond recognition. Back in college, I used to feel like I was dying after a simple 800-meter run. Now, I've been jogging up a mountain for 3 hours straight without a single break. I don't look or feel like a terminal cancer patient anymore. I'm going to get better, and then I'll find a way to reach out to the little people inside the box. I need to ask them for actual cultivation techniques. I'm not asking to be invincible. I just don't want to die young. I looked down at the wooden sword in my hand, feeling a surge of excitement. After my experience on the subway, I had wrapped the blade in plastic bags so it looked like a long, harmless stick. An hour later, I finally reached the summit of Banking Mountain. The light drizzle stopped, leaving the entire city of Tian spread out beneath me. The world looked clear and bright after the rain, and a cool breeze began to blow. I opened my arms wide, letting the wind brush against my face. I thought, if there's a chance to live, who would ever choose to die? The other climbers at the peak stared at me with curiosity, some even mimicking my pose. I let out a long, deep breath, releasing the tension in my chest. I had pushed myself so hard to get here, and the view was worth every step. Of course, I didn't climb all this way just to enjoy the view. Besides seeing my cousin, I still have something I need to prove. I walked past the massive temple complex sitting on the peak. The climb isn't easy, yet the place was still packed with people. The smoke from the incense was so thick you could see it from halfway down the mountain. But this wasn't my destination. I found a small side path and, after several turns, reached a dilapidated Taoist temple. I looked at the people kneeling inside, bowing before the three pure ones while whispering, "May Buddha bless you." Amitabha. I almost couldn't hold back a laugh at the absurdity. Compared to the main temple, this place was rotting away. Then I saw him, a young priest named Hongyu. He looked a bit more mature in his Taoist robes now. He gave a quick greeting and ran toward me. This was my cousin. He used to work in construction, but the industry took a massive hit. With the business no longer booming, he found himself displaced. He sat unemployed at home for an entire year, enduring constant scolding. One day, he decided to become a monk out of pure spite, which terrified his family. It took a lot of effort for him to end up here. After a lot of effort, they managed to get him ordained as a Taoist priest instead. His family still hoped he'd change his mind, but at least the income was decent. He pulled out a document and said, "Look, I finally got my Taoist certification. It was issued last month, state certified, and everything." I looked at the certificate, my eyelids twitching at the sight. Even Taoists need licenses these days. I'd heard they make a killing. "You could say you've finally landed on your feet," I told him. But Hongyu's face darkened the moment he heard my words. "That was in the past," he sighed. "Now the monks have stolen our livelihood. They've taken all the business away from us Taoists. Those monks have turned worshipping Buddha into a massive commercial machine. They're practically listed on the stock exchange now. How can we compete?" "You have no idea," he continued, leaning in. "When Wanyan Temple opened, they invited every big corporation in the city to donate. My master told me that back in his day, a single feng shui reading for the rich paid thousands. Not anymore. This industry isn't booming like it used to be. Still, I guess it's better than construction. At least I can sleep soundly every night." I looked at Hongyu and realized that most young people still had a romanticized view of Taoists. I sighed and asked him, "So, do you actually want to be a Taoist?" "The pay is low, but you get state subsidies and enough to survive," he replied. "We'll see." Hongyu turned down my suggestion, mentioning that Guangyang Temple was expanding fast. "Others have their eyes on our land and want to buy it," he said, his voice full of sorrow. "In about 6 months, I'll be out of a job and forced to go back to school. Then I'll have to go home and face another endless string of blind dates. Marriage is a grave, man. You don't want to go back yet. If I go back, my family will nag me every single day. You have no idea how ridiculous the people the matchmaker finds for me are." We chatted for hours until night fell, and it was time to part ways. I decided I had to help him. After all, he had done so much for me in the beginning. Time crawled by as the sky grew even darker. Hongyu left the Taoist temple and reached a place where no human had set foot. It was a desolate area he hadn't visited before. He waited for 2 more hours until the sky was pitch black and scanned his surroundings. He reached for the plastic wrap covering his sword. He stood alone in the dark, monstrous forest. The atmosphere was eerie, far removed from the city lights. He hadn't studied it much, but according to the records, this flying sword was for divination. It was carved with runes used for seeking omens, even in the world of the gods. The runes were built in, meaning even an ordinary person could use it. Hong Yu carefully placed the sword on the ground and slowly stepped onto it. Just as he expected, the flying sword actually moved. He couldn't keep his balance and fell straight off, but he wasn't disappointed. This thing could actually make him fly, he just wasn't used to it yet. It was like learning to ride a bike, so he kept trying and falling. After 2 hours, he finally took off, rising slowly into the air on that wooden blade. The divination formation on top kept him safe, letting him get bolder with his speed. He climbed higher and higher, 100 meters, 500 meters, then 1,000 meters up. The mountains below vanished as he laughed like a child, soaring through the sky. However, he made sure never to fly too far out. He stayed strictly within the airspace of Banjin Mountain. But something felt off, the mood wasn't quite right yet. Hong Yu's excitement gradually cooled into a calm focus. He thought for a moment, reached into his pocket, and pulled something out. He opened the music app on his phone and scrolled through his playlist. He blasted the volume to the max, thinking, now this is the right vibe. The only thing missing is a gourd full of wine, he muttered. Another half hour passed, and his skill with the sword grew by leaps and bounds. He began pulling off difficult aerial stunts high above the world. I tore through the sky, scattering the surrounding birds in every direction. They didn't even dare to fly over the Banjin mountain range while I was patrolling. I had never been this happy in my life, but slowly, a sense of dissatisfaction crept in. I looked up at the clouds and decided to test the absolute limits of this flying sword. With the legend of the sword theme blasting, I aimed the tip straight toward the heavens. After I soared away, a group of campers on the mountain looked up in a daze, staring at the sky in disbelief. I recorded it, one of the campers shouted, frantically pulling out his phone. The others were too shocked to move, but they quickly crowded around him to see the footage. Looking at the screen, they saw nothing but a dark blur until the music suddenly kicked in. A shadow flickered in the air and vanished, but you could clearly see it was standing on a sword. How is this even possible? Is this magic? It's too dark to see clearly, but post it online right now. I'm going to be famous for this. That was a real flying sword. It has to be real. They had seen it with their own eyes, even if it was only for an instant. 1,000 different theories began racing through their minds. Does the world have a hidden side? Does the government already know about this? Are the ancient myths actually true? Or is this the start of some spiritual disaster? The video went live, and the internet comments started flooding in immediately. Are you filming a toy model? Make it blurrier next time, haha. At least they aren't claiming it's a dragon this time. Could they make it look any more fake? The comments sneered at the blurry footage. The internet dismissed it instantly, but those campers knew the truth. They had seen it with their own eyes, no matter how impossible it seemed. But no matter how they tried to explain it, nobody believed a word they said. Wait, isn't there a Taoist temple on Banjin Mountain? One of them realized. Those Taoists must have immortal swords, another shouted. They started convinced that the entire mountain range was hiding something that had everything to do with the legends of immortals. They began debating the differences between Taoist masters and Buddhist monks, wondering if the monks could predict the future just like in the stories. Aren't monks supposed to make lotus flowers bloom with a touch? Let's go. Let's find a master and learn from him. They were convinced that maybe they could do it too. They wanted to cultivate, their heads filled with the logic of the novels they read. Confronted with the impossible, their common sense had completely evaporated. They were acting like children who had just discovered the world's greatest secret. Their veins were pumping with pure adrenaline, and I was the one responsible. While they spiraled into a frenzy, I had already soared far away. I was high above the clouds, leaving the world behind. From up here, the city lights below looked like dim embers in the dark. The city lights were glowing like brilliant dots, looking like a total dream. I wasn't worried about being recorded by anyone down there. After all, nobody was actually going to believe it was real. Immortals flying through the modern world? Yeah, right. Even if they caught me on camera, who would buy it? As long as I didn't overdo it or expose myself in crowded places, I'd be fine just enjoying the beautiful night scenery from above. I took a deep breath, feeling the air for the first time in a long while. It was freezing up here. I still didn't dare to fly directly over the city center. I just drifted over Mount Banjin, watching the distant city lights flicker. Eventually, the initial rush of excitement began to fade. The thrill was being replaced by a sense of responsibility. I felt like I should head back to the miniature world and check on things. I wondered how Li Qingyun was doing or if he'd run into any demons. Just as I was getting ready to turn back and head home, a sudden, massive roar filled the sky around me. I looked around and saw a huge passenger plane gliding slowly toward the city. It didn't seem to be having any mechanical issues. It was just making its final approach to land in the city below. I stared closely and saw the sleepy passengers through the windows. They were fighting off sleep, knowing they were about to land. Suddenly, one of the men seemed to fade from my focus. I noticed a young boy in one of the windows staring right at me. Without thinking, I gave the kid a small wave. The boy reached out and waved back at me through the glass. I immediately accelerated, breaking away from the flight path. I headed back toward Mount Banjin and found a small trail. It was the path leading back toward the city center. I touched down and caught a late-night taxi to get home. Honey, what are you looking at? The boy's mother leaned in, curious about what held his attention. Mom, is there someone flying outside? Is it Superman? Look, is that Superman? His mother just gave him a gentle smile. You must be mistaken, sweetie. It was probably just a bird. But a shadow had definitely moved past the window faster than the plane. It had vanished directly into the Banjin Mountains. The boy wasn't the only one who noticed that strange shadow. Several other passengers stood up, peering out into the night. They were losing their minds. A real encounter with a flying being. That person is flying on an arrow. Even the foreigners noticed the shadow outside and were stunned. It was clearly a human figure, but that wasn't the shocking part. Is he flying? Why are you guys so focused on witnessing what's happening? I don't know. Don't panic. Keep it down. The crew heard the commotion in the cabin. They rushed over to investigate and found the passengers in a total frenzy. Everyone was pointing out the window, shouting at the top of their lungs. He's flying. People scrambled for their phones, but the shadow was a blur. It vanished into the Banjin Mountains in an instant. The crew looked out the window and saw nothing. Please, we're about to land. It was just a bird. The passengers by the window nearly cursed out loud. A bird? What kind of bird looks exactly like a human being and just happens to be standing on top of a sword? It wasn't just one person, a whole group of them saw it. The figure had even waved at them before the shadow sped away. He was moving so fast that none of them could get a clear recording. I finally made it back home. I tossed my jacket aside and looked at the flying sword. This is way too inconvenient. Carrying this thing around in my hand is a pain. I need to ask my father for a storage bag. I need to put this sword away properly. And just like that, I was exhausted. The snacks in this world don't seem to have any spiritual aura at all. I had just finished a high-intensity flight that lasted the entire night. The snacks I brought from the miniature world were already gone. Feeling as heavy as an ordinary stone, I rested for a moment before checking the switch. I looked into the glass box to see how that world was doing. But I hadn't slept all night, and the fatigue was finally catching up to me. My eyes grew heavy, my vision blurred, and my spiritual aura began to fade. I collapsed onto the bed and fell into a deep sleep, completely unaware of the chaos I'd caused. My flight was about to cause a massive stir across the entire internet. It all started at Bird Mountain as soon as the passengers stepped off that plane. They began posting frantically online about what they saw from the cabin window. A man flying on a sword, and the kicker was that it wasn't just one witness. Everyone by the windows saw it, including the foreigners, and the news went viral instantly. Soon, someone found the footage from the campers at Bird Mountain and posted it too. At the same time, many other campers and tourists who were still on the mountain claimed they heard a strange, booming slogan echoing through the night. The legend of the sword and the immortal descending from the heavens. Countless people had seen dark shadows streaking across the sky. Suddenly, Bird Mountain became the center of a massive storm. The news that someone was cultivating immortality there spread like wildfire. As it happens, there is an old Taoist temple on that very mountain. It was a small, rundown place. Nothing flashy, especially compared to the prosperous Wangyang temple nearby. But this humble Taoist temple had never once tried to promote itself. Who could be living there? The internet was flooded with posts about it. Claims that someone was cultivating immortality on Bird Mountain were everywhere. There were photos and eyewitness accounts, even if they were blurry. Skeptics were shouting, questioning what was really going on. Maybe it was just a bird, but what if it wasn't? By the next morning, the curiosity was too much to handle. The entire Taoist temple on the mountain was completely surrounded. Master Liao woke up early and stared at the massive crowd of visitors. He looked absolutely stunned. These people weren't there for fortune-telling or to burn incense. They immediately started asking him if he could fly on a sword. The priest of the Temple of the Saints of the Last Days, that old Taoist, realized this was the moment the war would finally end. The traffic was immense, and soon, the loudspeakers all across the Taoist temple were set up and ready. They played the legend of the sword and the immortal on loop, ignoring any questions about the future. He just smiled, letting people's imaginations run wild with every grin. It was working perfectly. The scene left the monks of the neighboring Yin temple completely stunned. Their temple was even listed on the stock market. They couldn't believe such an absurd tactic was being used. It was a crude marketing stunt, but the real question was, did people actually believe it? They were skipping the worship of gods and Buddhas just to chase the dream of immortality. Donations to the Wangyang temple plummeted that day, infuriating the leadership. The Taoist Association even launched a massive ad campaign in Guizhou City. The mountains were crawling with people, and Liang was busier than ever. Meanwhile, in the world of the box, Hiwuji was covered in dust and didn't dare slow down. He was terrified of running into his pursuers again. Fortunately, luck was on his side today. He didn't encounter a single accident on the long road back to the sect. Finally, he reached the main hall. I reached Kingly Mountain at dawn and stared from a distance. All I could see across the barren land was a massive camp of half-demons. They had Kingly Mountain completely surrounded in tight circles. They were stationed everywhere, from the sky to the ground. It wasn't an illusion. There were even more of them than when I left. I, Hiwuji, finally made my way back. I moved cautiously through the inner layers of the sect's traps. I navigated the hidden formations I had activated on my way out. This was the very last formation the sect could power with spirit stones. It only had enough energy for one single round trip. Once I stepped through this time, the formation would automatically dissipate and vanish. The spiritual energy was officially spent, but I was finally home. I looked at the desolation surrounding the mountain and lost my words. I let out a long sigh, knowing I had finally fulfilled my mission. A familiar voice suddenly echoed, "Hiwuji?" I turned around and saw a thin young woman standing behind me. "Junior sister," I cried out as we embraced each other tightly. I had made it back. The sect leader said we can barely hold the line anymore. Today is the final day, and the mountain's resources are completely bone dry. If you hadn't come back, we would have been trapped here until we died, my junior sister said, her voice trembling. In her eyes, I was the only hope against the overwhelming enemy forces. I, Hiwuji, had actually dared to return to this hellhole. The other sect leaders on Kingly Mountain heard the commotion and came rushing toward me. Seeing me standing there unharmed, the masters of each faction stopped in their tracks. They all let out a collective sigh of relief. "Did you bring the resources?" they asked desperately. "Are you ready to help us?" Thank goodness Miss Luo returned in time. Otherwise, we really wouldn't have been able to resist those demons any longer. I looked at their anxious faces and knew the situation was more urgent than I imagined. I hurried to pull out the supplies I had gathered, but then I stopped. I saw a woman dressed in pure white walking straight toward me. The surrounding sect leaders immediately bowed their heads and called out, "Master." I wanted to tell her everything that happened on my journey, but her face was a mask of ice. She grabbed me, led me straight to the main hall, and slammed the door shut behind us. The sect leaders outside were left standing there, looking completely confused. Master Bailin usually never flinches, even if the sky is falling. Why is she like this today? Maybe Master missed her disciple a little too much. My junior sister watched the expressions of the people around her. The sect leaders stood there while I was dragged into the main hall. At that moment, Bailin's face showed no joy at all. She wasn't happy about my return. Instead, she was radiating pure fury. She threw up a soundproofing barrier and roared, "Why did you come back?" Hearing Bailin's roar, I felt the air in the room turn heavy. I knew my master was truly enraged when she screamed, "I told you never to return." Bailin's anger wasn't without reason. "What resources? What supplies?" she hissed. That was all just an excuse. She had used that lie just to trick the other sects. She had used the very last of her strength to clear a path for me. The moment she sent me away, she never intended for me to stay. She never wanted me to set foot on this mountain again. Because returning here means certain death. Now, seeing all her effort wasted because I came back, she was losing her mind. "Are you insane? Master, you can't do this." I couldn't just leave everyone behind. I knew she wanted me to live, but didn't she realize I wanted her to live too? She was going to die too. I stood with Master, looking back at Hyukingen. Seeing that determined look, Bailin knew words were useless now. "Why are you so foolish?" Bailin reached out with affection, gently stroking my hair. Her eyes were bloodshot and her strength was completely spent. She and I were really going to die here. "Master, I brought a book for you." I mentioned the resources, and maybe, just maybe, I told her I might have invited a senior to help, stuttering over my words. I couldn't even speak clearly, my voice trembling with every syllable. Would the Lord's word actually help us? I still didn't know. Why would a figure as great as the Lord want to help me? Resources? What resources? It all felt useless. Bailin slumped down onto a bench. She stared at the sky, her body drained of all power. She looked at my stuttering, pathetic state and sighed. She knew the great desolate land was famous for being a barren wasteland. "It's not like that, Master. There really are plenty of resources." She looked at me, her irritation growing. "Fine then, take them out and show me." She was certain I had nothing to give. I just needed a little more time to figure out how to save our lives. I just wanted Hyukingen to live. I looked around and whispered, "Master, this place is too small." My behavior made Bailin laugh, a hollow, desperate sound from someone who had run out of options. She had given up. "Fine, let's go outside." We both stepped out of the great hall. The sect leaders waiting outside watched us with anxious, piercing eyes. I waved them back. "Move back, give me more room." I kept pushing them until I had cleared a massive empty space around the city center. The disciples from the other sects stared at me like I was losing my mind. I didn't care about their doubts or their whispers. Bailin felt a wave of dizziness, certain that I couldn't have brought anything back in such a short time. She regretted letting me come out here, but before she could speak, a massive whistling sound filled the air. A giant, red limb suddenly slammed down right in front of her. Everyone looked up to see an enormous lobster leg towering over the crowd. It was so massive it literally blocked out the sun. Bailin's jaw dropped lower and lower. She couldn't even find the strength to close her mouth as she stared up at the mountain of meat. The crowd stood frozen, completely stunned by the scale of it. "What kind of demonic beast did this come from?" someone whispered. "It's too big to be real." The thought of the creature this leg belonged to sent a collective shiver down their spines. I turned to the sect leaders. "This lobster meat is overflowing with spiritual energy. There's no need to refine this into pills. You can absorb the energy directly to strengthen your bodies." Bailin turned toward me, her mind completely blank as I continued my presentation. She didn't hear a single word I said. She only wanted to know where her disciple found this. Looking at that terrifying lobster leg, she wondered if I had raided the lair of a divine transformation expert. Miss Luo, could this be a demonic beast from the outer sea? One of them asked. The more knowledgeable sect leaders felt a shiver run through them just looking at the limb. The outer sea is a maritime graveyard where even transcendental tribulation experts fear to tread. The beasts there are colossal and powerful. To survive, you must be at least a great cultivator of the divine transformation realm. They began to whisper, wondering if the great elder was actually an expert from the outer sea. Bai Lin grabbed Hyukingen and asked in a low, serious voice, "Tell me exactly what happened on the road." Everyone crowded around as Hyukingen nodded and began to recount our journey. As they listened, the expressions on the sect leaders' faces shifted from shock to pure awe. He told them of massive wooden logs falling from the heavens to crush demonic wolves. They whispered among themselves, "Perhaps the great elder wields the ultimate power of the wood element." Then he described the thunderous strikes that obliterated the killer insects. The crowd gasped, realizing the great elder had mastered the laws of thunder as well. Finally, he spoke of the hand that covered the sky and crushed the deadly pincers. A hand that literally blocked out the heavens, not just a technique, but a physical manifestation of power. The depth of my power was becoming unfathomable to them. The group of sect leaders stood there, their minds wiped clean of any thought other than pure terror and respect. Their minds were racing, but they truly had no idea who they were dealing with. They didn't even dare to keep speculating about my true identity. If they had any real concept of what a Grandmaster-level expert was, they'd know such a being would have detected them from miles away. Hyukingen nodded repeatedly, but Bai Lin just stood there with a deep frown. Could there really be someone this benevolent in the world? She suspected a hidden agenda. She wondered if I wanted her practice sword, and if that wooden blade held some profound secret. The other sect leaders spoke up again, asking if she could invite me to meet in person. They were in a moment of total crisis, and my help could change everything. Hyukingen's expression soured because he had no way of contacting me. Bai Lin saw through their desperation and told them coldly not to pin their hopes on a stranger. She argued that I might not even be as powerful as they were imagining. To her, the demonic wolves and killer insects were nothing special. She claimed they were just low-level spirits at best. Even the giant pincers, she argued, could have just been scavenged corpses. She wasn't trying to insult me, but she had to be realistic. In her world, you have to prepare for the absolute worst-case scenario. Hearing her words, the other leaders suddenly snapped out of their trance. It seemed like the truth. After all, Hyukingen was just a low-level hibiscus cultivator. They began to doubt the thunderous strikes and the hand that covered the sky. They probably thought I was an exaggeration born from their own ignorance. Hyukingen was anxious, wondering why they couldn't see my true power. But he had no way to argue with them. Outside the glass box, I watched them and felt a wave of disappointment. These people couldn't even handle a pair of tiny insect pincers. How dare they question me? Do they really not believe? I considered actually showing them a hand that covers the sky just to prove it. But looking at it from Bai Lin's perspective, she was just preparing for the worst. In her world of crisis, that's the only way to stay alive. Meanwhile, Inger was desperately trying to defend my honor to the others. Hyukingen was stunned, realizing he wasn't the only one who felt my presence. He quickly looked up at the sky, searching for a sign. The crowd fell silent and followed his gaze upward. But there was nothing there except the drifting clouds. I looked down at them and thought, what is it that you need right now? I needed to understand the limits of my influence over this tiny world. From my vantage point, I could see everything happening around Hyukingen. My vision stretched for hundreds of meters across their land. It seemed my range of interaction was tied to this field of view. 100 meters was nothing. I could reach them easily. I couldn't just reach down and wipe out the threat myself. Not those Yao monsters. And I couldn't let Hyukingen just charge into their nest alone. If I didn't watch over him and he died, would I even be able to see this world anymore? This world is suffering, so I decided to give them a chance at life. The right to choose. For Hyukingen. And for the others, only they know what they truly lack. Hyukingen heard my voice and looked toward where he thought I was. What do we need? He whispered. He suddenly realized how foolish he sounded after speaking. He was always so obsessed with explaining things to me. Even after seeing the hand that covers the sky, he didn't react immediately. Inside, he was thinking, the Great Elder is going to blame me. Hyukingen was worried, but his words sent a jolt through the crowd. Everyone around him started getting excited. The Great Elder was actually willing to help them. This was a massive deal, even if my true power wasn't what they imagined. Being able to destroy the Yaozu was proof enough of my strength. I was not someone to be underestimated. While they were arguing earlier, only Bai Lin had actually tried to do something. He could split the Yaozu. Bai Lin's expression shifted. She grew solemn, her face a mask of internal struggle. In the world of cultivation, if you want something, you have to give something. The more you receive, the higher the price you eventually pay. That was an immutable law of this world. If I were to act personally as the Great Elder, the cost to them would surely be astronomical. Just a moment ago, she had tried to split the Yaozu herself. She actually succeeded, but her top-grade magic sword paid the price. The internal structure of her blade had unexpectedly shattered. That was when she knew Hyukingen had encountered a true king, a being of absolute, limitless power, not some ordinary master. Now she had to figure out how to protect Hyukingen without asking for too much. She needed to keep the debt as small as possible. After a moment of thought, Bai Lin knelt down and clasped her hands. She looked up with a respectful, focused gaze. Great Elder, please grant us Thunder Spirit Stones to power the sect's Great Protection Array. This was the safest solution she could come up with. It was the lowest cost possible, since it didn't require me to step in directly. They only need to keep the sect's Great Protection Array running, even though they're surrounded by demi-demons in the Great Desert. As long as they have the Aozu, they can hold out for decades. If they're careful, 100 years isn't out of the question. But the demons are numerous, and the energy consumption is staggering. The demons won't be able to outlast them if the array stays up. Past battles prove the demi-demons can't break the formation on their own. The only real problem was the massive daily cost of keeping it active. If the cost weren't so high, she wouldn't have to risk open war. She wouldn't have to let Hyukingen flee the Inyan Mountain Thundervein. That exhausted formation was the most powerful defense she had. The Five Thunders Demonic Extermination Array. Outside the glass box, I froze when I heard Bai Lin's request. Thunder Spirit Stones? Where was I supposed to find something like that? I decided to ask her directly. Bai Lin hurriedly explained what qualified as a Thunder Spirit Stone. Thunder veins, or even heavenly thunder from a tribulation, would work. She clearly viewed me as a powerful thunder cultivator, especially after my previous display of power. The law of thunder. My power is unfathomable to them, but hearing her request stopped me cold. I had one thought. What even is a Thunder Spirit Stone? It felt like my bluff was about to be exposed. I scanned my room, desperately searching for anything related to lightning. Then I remembered, everything I drop into that glass box from the outside world ends up having some kind of insane magical effect on their cultivation world. I grabbed an old electronic thermometer I had lying around and pried it open. I pulled out a tiny button cell battery I'd bought for a few cents. Electricity counts as thunder, right? It was worth a shot. Back in the Xianyuan realm, Bai Lin was trembling with nerves. The leaders of the various surrounding sects were also breaking into a cold sweat. After a long silence, everyone turned their gaze toward Hyukingen. Hyukingen simply shook his head, and Bai Lin's heart skipped a beat. She worried her demands were too high, knowing thunder-related items are priceless. Even the most common Thunder Spirit Stone is a legendary rarity among cultivators. She realized her panic had made her overstep, and she prepared to apologize. But just as she opened her mouth, the clouds in the sky suddenly parted. Everyone looked up to see a circular piece of metal falling from the heavens. It slammed directly into the plaza in front of the main hall. The impact was so violent it left a massive crater in the ground. The sound was deafening as the metal disc hit the ground. It was perfectly circular, reflecting a blinding silver light. I spoke through the void, telling them, "This is a battery." Hyukingen immediately repeated my words to the crowd. "A battery, the key to lightning," he muttered, staring at the massive metal. The sect leaders looked at each other in utter confusion. None of them had ever seen anything like it, so Bai Lin ordered them to back up. She stepped forward slowly, approaching the giant battery. Watching her, the various sect leaders began to whisper among themselves. They remembered how the leader of the Bai sect first arrived in the Great Desolation. She founded the Blue Thunder sect using a powerful human lightning technique. But in this desolate land, spiritual energy is scarce and lightning magic is difficult to master. It consumes far too much magical energy for any cultivator to sustain. Bai Lin ignored their chatter and focused entirely on the object before her. She reached out and placed her trembling hand on the cold metal surface. Slowly, she began to extend her divine sense into the object. As her consciousness pierced through the metallic casing, she felt it. The raw power contained within was unlike anything she had ever felt. Boom! A sudden explosion of energy rocked the atmosphere. The sky, which had been clear just a moment ago, turned pitch black. The horizon was swallowed by dark clouds in an instant. Countless serpents of lightning began to writhe and hiss. They surged from Mount Inuan toward the sky, bathing the entire peak in blinding light. For a moment, heaven and earth turned completely white as a deafening screech filled the air. Bai Lin was thrown back by the sheer force of the discharge. She stumbled repeatedly before collapsing onto her knees on the hard ground. A mouthful of blood sprayed from her lips as she gasped, "Master." Seeing her fall, Hyukingen rushed to her side in a panic. He helped her up and asked, "Sect Leader Bai, what happened?" The crowd stood frozen, having only seen a chaotic seal of white light. The pillar of lightning vanished into the clouds, and everything returned to a haunting silence. Bai Lin's eyes trembled with disbelief as she whispered, "Lightning, a lightning pool." The surrounding sect leaders exchanged confused glances, wondering what a lightning pool even was. They were filled with doubt until, suddenly, a realization struck one of them. He stared at the circular metal object with a look of pure shock. He muttered under his breath that such a thing should be impossible. He spoke of the Lightning Spirit sect, one of the great orthodox sects of Zontu. For over 1,000,000 years, they had tried to harness a power that no human should possess. They used ancient thunder to build a lightning pool that only opens once every 30 years. A place where only the most elite sects and young geniuses are ever invited. They come to the lightning pool to temper their spirits. They use it to strengthen their physical bodies until they are unbreakable. Even powerful cultivators spend massive fortunes just to trade for a single entry. It is a rare chance to absorb the essence of thunder and boost one's vitality. The power of lightning can even reshape a human body from the inside out. Many have achieved greatness within the depths of that pool. And now, a brand new lightning pool was manifesting right here. It was right before our eyes, and everyone couldn't help but gulp in anticipation. Bai Lin was more shocked than anyone, never expecting to see this. This specific lightning pool was different. It was smaller than the legendary pool in Zantu. But the thunderous power inside wasn't inferior at all, it felt even stronger. I looked at the Wansa sect members and thought, do you all have a death wish? I noticed a man trying to rush toward the battery and immediately shouted for him to stop. The thunder here doesn't care about your life or your cultivation level. It doesn't distinguish between the strong and the weak when it strikes. This was a true lightning tank. It surpassed anything they had back in Zantu. Tempering the body through constantly shifting, violent lightning is a gamble. But this was something else entirely. This battery is packed with the most violent thunder imaginable, and the discharge is constant. If you try to temper your body with this, the only result will be a quick and painful death. Bai Lin wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth and stared at the sky. She looked as if she were trying to see the person behind the clouds. Was a casual move from him really this terrifying? No wonder he dares to call himself the Heaven Coverer. I watched Bai Lin struggle and then looked down at the batteries in my hand. I had the number 7 battery and the number 5, but I chose the button cell. It's a good thing I used the small one, or I might have leveled the mountain. I looked down at the tiny people below like a master observing ants. I began the countdown to connect the Great Trace Protection Array to the battery. The energy inside the button cell started flowing into the array without end. The one-stem protection array slowly began to glow with blinding light. Arcs of lightning jumped across Mount Engine, showing off their terrible power. How strange. Ayu put down his phone after recording the whole scene. He was always recording everything on that device. What is this? An array powered by a completely new form of energy? Ayu opened the replay and watched the footage again, mesmerized. I looked down at those tiny people who looked like miniature models. They were busy with their constructions. As I connected the battery to the array, Ayu smiled and slowly lifted the button cell. It hung suspended over the peak of Mount Engine, releasing endless bolts of lightning. The energy was being continuously extracted to cleanse the area. Every button cell in the world deserved a glorious moment like this in the array. Ayu blurred the edges of the footage, sped it up, and posted it on the internet. Everything in the video looked real, like something emerging from daily life. It looked like a showcase of new technology. The people looked just like scale models. This kind of tilt-shift technology isn't exactly new. Even ordinary people can master it with a little practice, so Ayu wasn't afraid of exposing himself. I mean, it had to be a joke, right? Who would actually believe there are tiny people cultivating immortality in this world? After Ayu posted the clip, he went back to scrolling through other videos. Today, Tian City was welcoming the peak of its tourist season. The streets were flooded with visitors. The mayor of Tian City publicly thanked everyone for their love of the city. The local government promised top-tier service, while the Banshin Mountain Temple was packed with young people. They were all crowding around the Four Pillars Pond of the Taoist Association. The abbot of Banshin Mountain kept insisting there was no danger and no one was cultivating immortality. He told the tourists not to be blind and to believe in science, calling the legends just stories. Immortal cultivation stories were a hit again, driving a new wave of period dramas. I saw a clip of an immortal sword and it immediately amused me. I felt like I had wasted my time that day in Lyon. Everyone is probably too busy, so maybe I should find another chance to fly again later. But I decided to forget it for now, since there were too many people and the risk was too high. Just a few minutes after my video went live, the view count and the engagement metrics began to shift. The likes on the video started skyrocketing frantically. The comments were wild, claiming the solar disk and the emperor had returned. I couldn't believe my eyes. They were joking about the positive and negative battery energy and calling me a king. Did they really think this was just some high-budget production? People commented that the costumes and props looked incredibly realistic. They assumed the tiny people were just plastic models or actors in a set. One user congratulated me, saying I had found the key to instant wealth. The comments reached the hundreds within minutes because people loved the special effects. I noticed my follower count was growing at a wild pace. I suddenly realized that I could actually make a lot of money from this. I could make a fortune just by filming this cultivation world. In the end, this might actually help these people move forward. I set my phone aside for a moment. I looked back down at the glass box. The array was fully recharged, and Bailing, who had been so worried, finally let out a sigh of relief as she realized something important. Her people owed that great senior far too much this time. This battery was a treasure comparable to a divine thunder ruler. She couldn't even imagine what kind of reward a being like me would want. Bailing looked at the sect leaders gathered in front of her. The heavy hitters of the great empire were all there. 13 famous human sects had sent their representatives, yet the strongest among them was barely at the peak of their power. At the 8th level of the Golden Core, they'd just be disciples in Zanzu. Meanwhile, Bailing's cultivation had already reached the mid-nascent soul stage. It felt less like an alliance and more like she was protecting them all. The battery's power had been absorbed by the array, but energy was still leaking out. Arcs of electricity flickered around the plastic casing. They could use this stray lightning to temper their physical bodies. Bailing led the group toward the massive battery. The massive object floated at the peak of the mountain. They all sat cross-legged directly beneath the floating battery. The lightning leaking from it flickered like a restless thunder serpent. It surged through Bailing's frame, tempering her physical body. The people around her were tense, but they followed her lead and began to cultivate. In this world, every single drop of power counts. Inga, come here, Bailing called out. This will benefit you too. At the foot of the mountain, a group of half-demons watched the peak with curiosity. They stared at that massive, circular metal object suspended in the air. It was the first time they had seen anything so peculiar since they surrounded the humans. The great protection array of the kingly sect had suddenly grown stronger, and it was all because of that strange metallic disc. The demons were perplexed, whispering among themselves about who could have done it. Just a few days ago, that great array looked like it was completely out of juice. It was fading, flickering, and ready to collapse at any moment. How did it suddenly explode with such a terrifying aura? It felt even more powerful than it had been in its prime. Ailey noticed the shift immediately and looked toward the young human woman. Elder, Ailey said, sounding worried. It seems that girl actually found help. The elder looked at the disc, let out a cold snort, and dismissed it as a cheap trick. That disc is just a prop, not a magic weapon at all, the elder sneered. This is all just Bailing's desperate trick. He believed she was using a final burst of power to hide her weakness and scare off the half-demons. It was a clever bluff, but he was certain she hadn't expected him to hunt her down personally. Ailey felt a chill in her heart seeing how arrogant this human remained despite the situation. Elder, you are a nascent soul cultivator, so you are capable, she said. But are we half-demons just cannon fodder to you? She warned him that her brothers in the south had already discovered massive craters and melted sand. Don't worry, the elder replied. When the time comes, leave the helper to me. I'll show you what a real master can do. He looked down on the great desolation sword seeds, claiming they were nothing compared to the hand of an immortal. The next morning, Bailing opened her eyes early as the sun began to rise. Arcs of lightning danced across her skin, and her eyes glowed with a piercing light. A brilliant, celestial azure blue. She had become a true daughter of thunder, merging her power with Yao Shua's spirit body. I watched as her form stabilized, her body now reinforced by the jade chain. Bailing clenched her fist, feeling the raw power coursing through her veins. Her physical strength was no longer inferior to the Suji monks, even those in the late stages. She could go toe-to-toe with them now, her flesh as tough as a great demon's. The thunder from my battery had elevated her physique to an unimaginable level. Bailing shook her head in awe, while the masters of the surrounding sects also opened their eyes. They stared at their own hands in disbelief, realizing the stray lightning alone had made them significantly stronger. Thank you so much, Senior, they whispered, bowing toward the peak. The monks finally reacted to the change. This is actually a very good result, I thought. The younger sister had reached the 14th level of refinement. She stood to the side, looking at Hugh Kingen with deep concern. Since ancient times, those who reached such heights were destined for greatness. Most cultivators only ever managed to reach level 10. But Hugh Kingen was already at level 14 with no signs of a breakthrough. Bailing had intended to use the battery's thunder for a specific purpose. She wanted to force Hugh Kingen to finally break through his limits. But to her surprise, it still wasn't working. It seemed there was something unique about Inji's constitution. Inji, you've always been curious about one thing, haven't you? Your true background, Bailing said suddenly, turning to Hugh Kingen. Hugh Kingen froze and immediately fixed his gaze on Bailing. She had been brought here as a mere infant. The identity of her parents was the one thing she craved to know most. Up until now, Hugh Kingen knew absolutely nothing about her past. Bailing had never breathed a single word about it before. Back in Banzhou, I felt a familiar presence, and if I'm right, they are already here, hunting us down. To be precise, they are hunting you. Hugh Kingen was stunned, but I knew we had to survive this first. If we make it out safely, I'll tell you everything, Bailing said, rising slowly. Her entire body began to float, and the rest of the sect noticed immediately. They could all feel the abnormal energy radiating from Bailing. They looked up and saw a figure hovering slowly beneath the Hindu mountain. This was it. She looked just as she did back in Banzhou. The younger sister exclaimed, "It looks like a fight. Should I help them?" But she was still far too weak for this level of combat. If she tried to interfere, the entire mountain would likely crumble. The Yun's sect would vanish, I thought, realizing the gravity of the situation. I began searching through the room for anything useful. Meanwhile, the tension outside reached a breaking point. Bailing stared at the old man in the distance and spoke slowly. "Seventh Elder. It's been a long time. Do you still recognize me?" "Bailing, you're as cunning as ever, hiding from us for 20 years. No wonder you tried to take Hugh Kingen from the sect at the start," he said. The seventh elder narrowed his eyes at her. Watching from the shadows, I suddenly realized the truth. The old man's expression shifted, changing completely right before my eyes. Was this really a nascent soul monster? He seemed so different before. He had looked so frivolous, ignoring everyone, but now that the battle started, he was lethal. He wasn't going to show us any mercy at all. 7 flying swords slowly emerged from the seventh elder's body. His aura reached its peak, looking like he was ready to give his all. Considering we were sect brothers, hand over Hugh Kingen now. I'll give you a quick death, bailing otherwise. Bailing looked at him calmly and asked, Seventh Elder, must the Taoist sect really follow this path? The Seventh Elder just sneered as his swords hovered in the air. The sword energy surged in every direction, filling the sky. Suddenly, the 7 flying swords released a massive wave of power toward the ground. The energy gathered together, looking like it would split the very heavens. The strike tore through the sky and headed straight for the earth. It was aiming directly for the core of the sect's protection formation. Bailing rushed to intercept it, intending to resist the blow, but in the next instant, the 7th Elder was already standing right in front of her. Thunder erupted from Bailing's body, but the 7th Elder didn't flinch. He used his vast combat experience to find her weakness, using his hand like a blade to shatter her lightning defense. Bailing suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood. She could barely stay in the air, her strength fading fast. The gap was just too wide. The 7th Elder had been a nascent soul monster for 1,000 years. She hadn't even reached that level yet. She was no match for him at all. So, you're really going to protect Hugh Kingen until your dying breath? Fine. Out of respect for the Holy Maiden, I'll give you a quick end. The 7th Elder casually flicked the blood off his hand as the pressure intensified. A massive surge of crimson sword energy erupted from him. It tore straight through the sect's great protection formation, shattering the formation's eye. Nobody dared to stop it. That was the power of the old monster's 7 swords. The people halfway up the mountain watched in horror as their only shield vanished. A formation that had stood for a year was broken like it was nothing. Everyone stood there, completely stunned. Black Hunter, what are you still waiting for? The 7th Elder's voice boomed from the sky, calling out to his subordinate. Black Hunter froze for a second, then immediately roared, "Follow me, attack!" In an instant, the half-monsters surrounding Mount Yuan unleashed their true power. The black crows swarmed toward the mountain in a fit of rage. Without that formation, Mount Yuan was completely defenseless against the tide. The sect members on the mountain watched, paralyzed by the sight of the incoming horde. Who would have thought the formation we relied on most would be shattered so easily? Even a casual strike from that monster was terrifying. The members of these small sects were reduced to a trembling mess the moment they saw those men. I watched as Bailing was completely suppressed. One move was all it took for his sword to slice through our great formation. I knew then that this battle had been a farce from the very beginning. A figure suddenly plummeted from the sky and crashed right in front of me. It was Bailing, her body broken and exposed. She looked miserable. Not a single inch of her skin was left unscarred. A terrifying, bloody hole gaped in her abdomen, and her breathing was faint. The 7th Elder descended slowly, his eyes locked on us. He landed right in my path, blocking any hope of escape. The sect masters cowering behind me started screaming in a panic. "Miss Hugh, hurry. Call for Senior Sishin to come save us. If you don't call him now, we're all dead." Hearing their cries, my heart sank into a chaotic mess. The senior had already done so much for me. This man before me was too powerful. What if the senior fought him and died? I couldn't bear the thought of him losing his life here because of me. The 7th Elder caught the name and let out a cold, mocking laugh. He claimed he had never heard anyone dare to use a name like that. Especially not here, in this remote corner of the Great Desolation. How dare someone use a name like Sishin, he sneered. It's absolutely ridiculous. Damn it. I heard the old man's mocking laughter and felt a surge of irritation. How could this old fossil be so arrogant? But then I realized, these little people were way too close to him. If I made a move now, I would definitely end up hurting Bailing. I couldn't even use the piezo igniter from last time. The blast radius was too large for this distance. That's when I suddenly remembered the laser I had bought. I had tucked it away somewhere after the last encounter. I began searching my pockets in a frantic rush. I felt around until my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. There it was, the laser pointer. I looked down at the glass box and thought, this should do the trick. I gripped the device, ready to intervene. But inside the glass box, someone else spoke up first. It was the master of the Sand Desert sect. "Old man, I'd advise you to be a lot more respectful. You should show more respect to the great Elder Sishin." Everyone stared at the Sand Desert sect master in shock. Was he always this brave? Even the 7th Elder was terrified. The old man was a powerful cultivator from the Calamity Sea. A small sect like theirs couldn't afford to offend someone like that. But the sect master didn't care. He was ready to go down swinging. The rest of the crowd stayed silent, watching the tension rise. Even the half-human demons who had just attacked Duncy went quiet. They didn't dare utter a single word while looking at the 7th Elder. Right then, a faint voice echoed inside Bailing's mind. It was a weak, familiar breath reaching out to her. "Linger, don't give up. Just admit your mistake to the master. Tell the sect master you'll hand over the great Elder's golden pill." It was Xian Shui, the most talented among the monsters. The master promises that his people will come to rescue the men. The pill is safer with him than it is with the Supreme Elder. Hearing that familiar voice, Bailing let out a cold smile. "Senior sister, why do you think I ran away in the first place?" I watched the drama unfold from behind the glass screen. They were all standing right on the edge of the mountain cliff. A man suddenly smashed the tea set sitting right in front of him. The porcelain shattered into 1,000 pieces across the floor. He was shaking with rage, blue veins bulging all over his body. Did she really say that? A woman asked, her face completely blank. But a moment later, her expression twisted into a mocking laugh. The man's eyes were filled with nothing but bitter regret. Hyukingen is my granddaughter, my own flesh and blood, born of my daughter. I have to see her, even if I have to face Bailing's cold stare again. Bailing never even looked at the girl, even after driving her own daughter to death. She was Bailing's master, yet their bond was built on blood and betrayal. Sovereign, the fourth elder, Tian Kan, has been in the Great Desert for a long time. She had been hiding in the shadows, watching every single move they made. When the time is right, she'll finish the job exactly the same way. She plans to snatch Hyukingen away before the seventh elder can even blink. As for the bloodline connection, it didn't matter to her anymore. The woman's voice drifted through the room like a chilling breeze. It sounded soft, but the words she spoke were incredibly cold. Lu Bubin listened to the plan, his face turning pale. He had no choice but to nod in silent agreement. He couldn't let those innate Dao bones fall into Lu Yan's hands while the sect was divided. I am the sovereign of Dao. I am Swanson, but everyone knows Lu Yan has already left me. He took half of the Dao Xuanzong sect with him, leaving only ruins behind. Those Dao bones are my only chance to stabilize the sect, and I won't let them go. What a pitiful girl, forced to endure the absolute agony of this life. The world can't even imagine the pain of having one's Dao bones ripped away. The fourth elder mentioned seeing a lightning strike of extraordinary power in the Great Desert. Could a great cultivator from that wasteland actually be making a move? Lu Bubin scoffed at the idea of anyone from such a barren place acting against us. So Hyang is bold enough to represent the people of Dao Xuanzong herself. She will follow the plan, while Tian Kan hides within the clouds above. Watching from a distance, she waits for the seventh elder to show a single opening. That old woman is incredibly cautious, despite her talk of purity and virtue. Her body remains tense, never relaxing for a second even against a weak enemy. Tian Kan inspected the area carefully from her vantage point. Suddenly, she noticed the massive pincers looming over the mountain peak. They were hidden right there, amidst the swirling mist of the clouds. Is there really a great cultivator hiding here? Tian Kan muttered to herself. Just looking at those enormous pincers made her blood run cold. She realized this was a world of cultivation where no medicine could heal the fear. This world has always respected strength, you pathetic cultivators of the wasteland. You are nothing but trash from the Great Desert. The seventh elder sneered and reached out toward the two of them. She thrust her hand forward with lethal intent. She moved to seize Hyukingen, the sovereign of the desert. The desert assassin gasped, stunned by the sheer speed of the attack. I realized then that she was far faster than anyone anticipated. But suddenly, a warning echoed. Don't touch it. The battery on the ground began to spin slowly as the sect leader watched. He pointed a trembling finger right behind the seventh elder. The seventh elder just smiled with pure, unfiltered disdain. She thought, childish tricks like these won't work on a real cultivator. The cultivation level of this wild land was truly a joke to her. Balan watched from the dirt, his eyes widening in shock. I noticed the light intensifying as the energy reached a breaking point. The battery's rotation accelerated until a purple cyan bolt shot out. The lightning disc discharged, aiming straight for the seventh elder. The hair on her neck stood up as she instinctively tried to leap away. But a second bolt erupted from the disc and struck her midair. The seventh elder's blood-curdling scream echoed through the sky. I listened to the half-demons below as a collective shiver ran down their spines. Tian Kan, who had been hiding behind the clouds, felt a surge of pure terror. He stared down at the seventh elder, who had been reduced to a charred husk. His scalp went numb as he wondered what kind of lightning could do that. He had never seen anything like it in his entire life. Was it the law of Bambusu, the golden law, or the law of Exxon? Could it be a heavenly tribulation law? No, that was impossible. Tian Kan stared fixedly at the massive disc and felt a wave of relief. He was glad he hadn't announced his departure yet. Otherwise, he might have been the one caught in that blast. Seizing the opening, Hyukingen moved quickly. He pulled Balan up from the dirt and supported his weight. He pressed a pill into Balan's hand, and the boy's pale face regained some color. Miss Luo, what kind of lightning is this? The sect leader asked. The sovereign of the desert looked at the seventh elder with grim fascination. The woman was being struck repeatedly by relentless, crackling bolts. She was barely clinging to life. The seventh elder had been enduring the assault for 3 minutes and was dazed. Most lightning techniques are instant, but a continuous strike like this was unheard of. I had called it direct current, and Hyukingen wondered if that was the name of a god. I knew the great elder wouldn't have any problems. His master was on the verge of death, yet the great elder hadn't said a word. I realized I had completely misunderstood him again. How could I have ever doubted the great elder? Hyukingen swore that if he ever reached true glory, he would repay me. The surrounding sect leaders watched with their mouths hanging open. They stared at the seventh elder, who looked like a walking corpse after the shock. They realized the methods of the hidden heaven were truly terrifying. The Thunder Pond doesn't attack, but my batteries certainly do. Up in the sky, Tian Kan used his magic to eavesdrop on the name direct current. He searched his memories and even the records of the Dao Swanson library. There wasn't a single mention of this type of lightning anywhere. Watching the seventh elder suffer so miserably, Tiankin feared for his life. Who exactly was this cultivator constantly helping Hyukingen to give away such a powerful magical treasure just like that? Was his family really that wealthy? Outside the glass box, I stood there stunned while holding my laser pointer. That button battery was still discharging a massive amount of excess energy. The way it fired from the mountaintop made it look like a defensive tower. Enough, the seventh elder roared, her voice cracking with pain. The lightning from that disc seemed infinite, with no intention of stopping. Balan, having recovered just enough, moved instantly. She dragged Hyukingen behind her as the seventh elder reached out his hand. Suddenly, a black box appeared, floating with a sinister red aura. The seventh elder roared in heartbreak, forced to waste his greatest treasure. Up in the clouds, Tiankin frowned and quickly activated a secret spell. He realized Lu Yin and the others had actually obtained the great evil's treasure. The seventh elder's power began to skyrocket right before his eyes. Moments ago, he was a mere nascent soul cultivator. But in just a few breaths, his aura rivaled the soul transformation stage. He was ascending directly into the light of a higher realm. No magic in existence could explain a jump this massive. Tiankin watched Hyukingen and Balan from above, his heart sinking. He lamented secretly, knowing there was no hope left for them. I thought, I'd better save myself before the seventh elder finds me. I gripped my laser pointer tighter, watching the box's energy surge. Sinister energy erupted from the black box, crawling up the seventh elder's body. The overflowing aura began to wrap around him like a cocoon. I watched as his physical form began to expand and distort. The scattered energy was condensing into something blunt and terrifying. The energy contaminated the half-demons, driving them into an instant, violent frenzy. Ailey screamed for a desperate retreat, urging everyone to move now. They fled as the Sin Hong breath relentlessly eroded their own kin. Fei Li's heart bled as she cursed those wretched humans. The battery's assault continued, but the Sin Hong breath swallowed every lightning strike. The lightning grew denser until storm clouds choked the entire great desolate land. Mount Inyun glowed like a second sun, its lightning power shaking the very heavens. A group of cultivators huddled together, desperately resisting the earth-shattering pressure. As the Sin Hong breath expanded, the battery pushed its output to the absolute limit. The energy finally condensed into a single, devastating pillar of falling lightning. Even at the furthest edges of the great desolate land, the devastation was palpable. The sheer terror of that power was unlike anything I had ever seen. This terrifying display of lightning became the focal point of the entire world. It drew the eyes of every powerful cultivator for miles. They stood at a distance, watching the horizon of the great desolate land. They wondered which ancient master was engaged in such a world-ending battle. The aura was so overwhelming they assumed it must be a soul transformation expert. One whispered that it would be a dream to witness such power up close. I thought, up close, you'd be dead before you could even blink. The battery couldn't keep up with the box, and the seventh elder's sanity finally snapped. His eyes burned red like dying stars. He glared at the spinning battery and let out a sudden, primal roar. That sound didn't belong to a human, and the shockwave hit the weak half-demons nearby. They dropped dead on the spot, leaving only the carnage behind. Then, the Sin Hong auras began to shift. They gathered into a single, torrential current of dark energy. It was terrifying, snapping the line of contact instantly. The battery disc took the hit and stopped spinning entirely. It tumbled down from the peak of the mountain. The dark clouds in the sky began to dissipate as the earth fell silent. Everything finally returned to a haunting calm. The seventh elder let out a jagged, manic laugh. He had completely lost his mind to the frenzy. But in his head, he had finally gotten rid of that annoying object. Hyukingen rushed over and pulled Balan into a tight embrace. Balan stared at the seventh elder's descent into madness. She moved slowly, taking her father's place with a cold, quiet resolve. She closed her eyes, ignoring the seventh elder's presence. The younger sister stood up, her face smeared with dirt and soot. She looked around at the absolute disaster surrounding them. She looked up at the scarlet breath staining the sky and swallowed hard. Now, it was time for the real test. It was the seventh elder's turn to face the music. He looked down at Hyukingen, ready to send him to meet his ancestors. He wanted to kill everyone. The more dead, the better. Every sect lord on Mount Injin felt the weight of total despair. Even the grand formation they relied on had been completely shattered. The shield covering the sky was gone, and they knew they wouldn't survive. They had witnessed a righteous sect elder descend into pure, demonic madness. The seventh elder had absolutely no reason to let any of them live. If I have to die at the hands of a master cultivator, I suppose dying at this level is somewhat acceptable. Tian Sanlian looked at the sky, her face turning deathly pale. She never expected the seventh elder to end up like this. His demonic transformation was more terrifying than anything I had ever seen. That treasure could move heaven and earth. It was a spiritual artifact, maybe even immortal. And the seventh elder had just destroyed it like it was nothing. It seemed like everything was a massive mistake, and we were all going to die. But then, Tian Kong suddenly realized a glaring problem regarding that immortal artifact. An item that powerful has a master, and I am the one watching over this world. But the immortal master of that artifact still hadn't appeared. I told Injin to ask the elder if he was willing to step in and act. I was ready to offer everything, because Belan simply cannot be allowed to die. Hukingen's master's legacy and bloodline must not end in this place. But before Hukingen and I could even make contact, the sky that had just settled suddenly began to churn once more. What is that? A tiny red speck appeared in the heavens. In a heartbeat, that speck transformed into a blinding flash of crimson light. It sliced through the clouds and plummeted toward the earth. Tian Kang's hair stood on end as he burned every ounce of strength to dodge it. I looked back and realized it wasn't a person at all. It was a massive pillar of light descending toward the ground. Its arrival didn't cause a massive explosion or a shockwave. It looked like nothing more than an ordinary red beam, but looks are deceiving. That red light struck the seventh elder directly on the crown of his head. It completely overwhelmed him in an instant. The seventh elder, the man who looked like an unstoppable demon, was suddenly swallowed by that bloody aura and knocked out of the sky. He fell like a kite with its string snapped, plummeting toward the dirt. The red light didn't fade, pinning the seventh elder down with its crushing power. The aura surrounding him ignited instantly, bursting into a fresh roar of flames. Red fire surged from his body as the seventh elder tried to flee, but there was no escape. It didn't matter where he tried to run or hide. The red light followed him relentlessly across the scorched earth. Everywhere that light touched was transformed into a hellish wasteland. The sheer terror of that power left everyone watching paralyzed. They watched in silence as the seventh elder, the man who had just been tearing the sky apart, was broken like a common insect. He writhed on the ground in agony until, finally, he was burned alive, leaving nothing but a trail of desolate, scarred earth behind. Then, the red light vanished instantly, as if it had never existed at all. From the moment the light appeared to the seventh elder's tragic end, hardly a few breaths had passed for a supreme, half-god being. He died right there like a bug. He didn't have the strength to resist, leaving behind nothing but a lingering sense of dread. Not even a corpse remained for the witnesses to find. Whether they were half demons or humans, not a single soul dared to make a sound. They were so terrified that their voices had completely failed them. Up in the sky, Tian Kang's forehead was drenched in a cold sweat. When was the last time he had felt the suffocating grip of death so closely? I realized then that this red light wasn't just light, it was an omen. It wasn't like that thunder, loud and ostentatious. I didn't even dare to imagine the sheer terror of its energy. If that red light reached me, I feared I wouldn't last a single second. The sect master told me to seize Hukingen and kill anyone in my way. But thinking about that terrifying power, I couldn't help but curse. Kill them? With power like that? Tian Kang was still trembling with fear. Now I understood why that elder dared to call himself the one who covers the heavens. At least in front of us, he truly did. There was nothing wrong with him claiming such a title. He really was the one who covers the sky. Outside the glass box, the truth was much simpler. I clicked the laser off and exhaled. I looked at the scorched marks on the ground inside the box and sighed with relief. I had waited for the seventh elder to fly high and away from Hukingen before firing. I didn't want to hurt her by mistake. Compared to a bulky battery, this laser pointer was much more precise. But even with that precision, I have to be careful not to injure my own people. I put the pointer away and looked down at the miniature world. I leaned in and asked, Hukingen, are you alright? Being a dog is great, and the sound of music is even better. But for Alii, the dragon shepherd of Hukingen, the future was still uncertain. He still hadn't recovered from that terrifying scene a year ago. The moment he heard my voice, he shivered and responded immediately. I'm fine, Great Elder. I'm fine, except for being a bit shaken up. He was terrified, even though Hukingen didn't have a single scratch on it. Bailing heard Hukingen talking to himself and knew it wasn't a problem. It was that elder who covers the sky. He was speaking with his god. The disciple spoke again, begging to avoid a dangerous suspension. Hukingen hurriedly explained that the blood suspension hadn't been an accident. Speaking in ancient Chinese, he said, Elder, my master has a treasure to offer you. To be honest, I wasn't interested. I had to copy his tone and told him, no, just let us clean up this mess. Do that first. Hukingen turned his gaze toward the sect masters. He addressed the various sects in ancient Chinese. Those sovereigns immediately snapped to attention. They looked nearby at the half-demons trying to flee after the seventh elder's defeat. Most of those half-demons were already lost, wandering aimlessly in their defeat. A few half-demons managed to survive. Only a few dozen of them were left standing. They were paralyzed with terror, feeling every eye in the place locked onto them. The half-demons froze in their tracks, unable to move another inch. They knew instantly that a true powerhouse was still watching them from the sky. Thank you, Hukingen muttered under his breath. He shook his head slowly, looking at the survivors. These children were only following orders, he pleaded. I was the one who instigated everything, from start to finish. They have never actually taken a human life. Can you please just let them go? I will order them to head north to the extreme ice cave. They will never return, ensuring the survival of their ethnic group. This was the only solution the Black Hunter could come up with. The extreme ice cave was a void, completely devoid of spiritual energy. Living there would be a fate worse than being on Earth. It was a barren, desolate wasteland. But to survive, they would endure it, even as the sect masters watched with cold eyes. The leaders didn't know how to respond, so they all turned their gaze toward Bailing. Bailing let out a helpless sigh, knowing exactly what had to be done. She had found her courage and her confidence again. Naturally, she wouldn't dare to face the human swordsman alone, but she knew the seventh elder was the one who forced this situation. I didn't have the right to punish them if the great senior hadn't done so already. I had to make a decision, even if the battle's outcome didn't affect human lives. It all came down to him, the one defeated by the senior with a single move. Is it the great senior Sishin? I wondered as I listened. Eileen's body couldn't stop trembling at the thought. How would that senior punish them? Would I crush them like bugs inside the glass box? To be honest, I didn't feel any disgust toward these disguised monsters. After all, being born this way wasn't their choice. In reality, they were victims too. From the very beginning to the bitter end. They gained nothing, and most of their kind ended up dead. It was truly pathetic, but more importantly, I noticed several catgirls among these monsters. They were the exact kind of catgirls that fit perfectly into a man's aesthetic, the kind that fuels human fantasy. At the end of the day, I'm only human. I can't escape the law of beauty, so I decided to keep them as my greatest daily pleasure. It's beautiful to watch them move inside the glass box, and it's even better when the little person is very easy on the eyes. I hope one day my field of vision expands. Maybe then I could catch a catgirl bathing. How could I have such a dirty thought? Inside the box, Hyukingen looked stunned, as if she had misheard me. She looked at Eiley, who was so nervous he was practically grinding his teeth. The heartbeats of the other disguised monsters slowed down one by one. Life and death were right around the corner. The senior said he's going to keep you, Eiley. What does he mean by keeping us? What does that mean? Eiley didn't understand. It's like when mortals keep dogs. You're a dog demon, aren't you? Hyukingen explained, trying to make sense of the situation. She was becoming more familiar with my words and could infer my thoughts. She could even sense my tone. Suddenly, a strange desire rose in Eiley's heart, like a child seeking approval. A dog, even if they were just meat on someone else's cutting board now. But even a disguised demon has his dignity. Not far from the mountain, a massive red object descended from the sky. Everyone rushed to look. A thin leg, large as a small mountain, hit the ground, releasing an exquisite fragrance. Within that strange scent, the fruit itself looked very peculiar. It's strange, but there's also a spiritual aura radiating from it. That massive, thin leg is packed with rich spiritual energy. These poor desert demons have lived like scavengers their whole lives. Where would they have ever seen something this magnificent? If it weren't for the life or death crisis pressing down on them, their instincts would have driven them to fight for it immediately. Hyukingen spoke up suddenly, her voice cutting through the tension. The senior said this is for you, she announced. If it's not enough, he has more. Eiley stared blankly at the enormous object, his jaw dropping. He didn't even know what that giant leg was, but he couldn't close his mouth. Is this for us? He stammered. Yes, you can eat it. Just don't fight over it, Hyukingen added, nodding as she spoke. The disguised monsters charged toward the massive leg like starving beasts. They had been dirt poor their entire lives and had never seen meat like this. The bloodlines inside their demon bodies were screaming at them. Oh, senior, you are so wise, Eiley cried out, his pride completely gone. Actually, I've been a dog demon since I was a child. Everyone just mistook me for a wolf. Thank you, senior, for letting me find my true self. Woof woof. If he had waited a second longer, he wouldn't have gotten his share. Who says being a dog is a bad thing? Being a dog is great, and watching that pack of monsters run wild, all their fear had vanished. The cultivators from Mount Yun watched with a mix of shame and envy. They had a clan to rely on, but it wasn't nearly as grand as this. They had never seen demon beast meat like this before. Everyone stared at the desert sand sect master in pure horror. Looking at that massive hunk of demon beast meat, he could confirm its origin 100%. He knew it was a demon beast carrying the blood of the ancient phoenix. Back when he first broke through to the nascent soul stage, he was full of ambition. He decided to leave the sect life behind and venture into the world of men. He ended up at the edge of the terrifying sea of calamity. The things he witnessed there were beyond anything he'd ever imagined. He compared the enormous leg on the ground to what he had seen back then. That phoenix-blooded demon beast and this meat were almost identical. Khan even felt certain that this leg belonged to that exact same legendary beast. I had seen it before. Witnessing that terrifying struggle just once was enough to extinguish my fire. The demon beast that shattered my Tao heart is dead, eaten by a group of mere followers. How deep does the terror of this heaven-covering land go? It seems to favor Kingen. Maybe it wants her as a disciple, or even a wife. Is it after Hyukingen's Tao bones? Would a cultivator of that level really stay in this valley? My head feels like it's about to explode. Suddenly, a voice echoed inside Tiansan's mind. It was the sect master. The situation was becoming incredibly complicated. Elder Kian is dead, and the sect master is asking for a report. He asked if I was the one who killed him, as if I could even achieve such a thing. I let out a bitter, hollow laugh. I don't even know how much longer I have to live. A being of that magnitude has certainly noticed my presence by now. I've become a tiny speck in the middle of a massive problem. He knows I'm here, yet he hasn't named me. What does that even mean? I don't dare guess his intentions, nor do I dare mention him to the sect master. It's better to just give up and never return to the great desert. There is a great terror here that leaves everyone stunned and speechless. I requested to leave the Daoxian sect immediately before the transmission cut to silence. I, Tiancan, have seen things in the great desert that I don't even dare to speak aloud. Luo Wen couldn't sit still anymore, his mind racing with these thoughts. He hurried to the deepest part of the Daoxian sect, reaching the massive underground pool. An ancient, simple flying sword hovered over the water, radiating a cold, steady light. Luo Wen knelt immediately and said, Elder Kanggu, I know you have no interest in the League's disputes. But as the head of the Daoxian sect, I must ask, what happened? What exactly took place in the great desert? The flying sword spun slowly as a voice replied, nothing happened. Luo Wen offered a bitter, forced smile at the response. At least nominally, I am still the sect master of Daoxian. Do I not even have the right to ask questions? Is there truly nothing to report? He was technically just a branch leader, but the title of sect master still weighed on him. The flying sword stopped spinning and drifted slowly to the side. A shadow emerged, floating at the top. It was a young girl, barely 12 or 13. She wore clothes from a completely different era, and Luo Wen bowed, even lower in respect. I can help you look, the girl said, closing her eyes as Luo Wen held his breath. This is a critical moment for the sect. Internally, Lu Yin is trying to tear Xuanzong apart. Externally, several sects in Zanto have been acting strange, frequently visiting Lu Yin. They are all circling like vultures, waiting for a chance to strike. Because Hukingen's Dao bones are simply too valuable to ignore. As long as I can get my hands on them, I'll be able to stabilize the entire sect in an instant. But if they fall into Lu Yan's hands instead, then Xuanzong will be torn apart for good. It's a total disaster that the internal and external balance of his soul is so fragile. I'm running out of people I can actually trust to send out. Kong Wujian is the sword of the founding patriarch himself. After the founder fell, this land became a realm of the living. Kong Wujian sat within the sect, waiting for a true external crisis. It only strikes when the mood takes it, or when everything is on the verge of total destruction. The tragedy is that if the sect splits from the inside, Kong Wujian will just see it as an internal matter and refuse to act. Suddenly, the sword let out a low, vibrating hum. Everything in the surrounding area flooded into its consciousness. The divine sense of a living weapon is a terrifying thing. The sword spirit swept across Santu and reached the great desert. Everything here was a complete wreck, with the earth turned inside out. The spirit followed the lingering aura, tracking it toward the sky, reaching further and deeper than ever before. A terrifying, giant golden hand. It descended from the sky with boundless pressure, crushing the sword spirit's will. Back in the dungeon, Kong Wujian began to tremble violently. The sect master watched in horror. He looked closer and saw the blade of Kong Wujian instantly covered in cracks. The spirit girl appeared once more, but now she was faint, her very life force flickering out. Luo Buvin gasped, shocked to see the sword spirit weakening so fast. She turned her fading eyes toward the sect master. She whispered slowly, a great terror, a hand that covers the sky. Young man, do not go, she warned before the sword forest vanished. The spirit retreated into the blade, muttering, I must rest, protect the sect. Silence fell over Kong Wujian. A cold shiver ran through my heart as I felt Senior Jianlin's pure fear. If even she doesn't dare to speak of it, what is happening? What exactly is out there in the great desolation? The sect master walked slowly out of the cave. The girl's silhouette burned into his mind. The sheer terror of it. I've never seen anything like this since joining the Xuanzong sect. It was a gruesome sight, as if half the sky was about to collapse. Who exactly is the master behind that hand? That giant golden hand, even among those ancient, elder demons. I have never witnessed such a terrifying level of oppression. If I hadn't dodged quickly, I feared I would have been drained of all life. I would have died right there under that hand that blotted out the sun. It feels like I hit something, I muttered, hurriedly pulling my hand back. I had reached deep into the glass box and now looked inside carefully. There was nothing there at all. Could it have been an illusion? I couldn't understand it, and by now, night had already fallen. Once the moment passed, it was truly gone. After a full day of organizing, the humans and demonic beasts below finished up. They finally cleared the battlefield, and I listened in on their conversation. I heard Arenan say her master was giving the cave to Swan, so I reached out. I extended my hand to grab it, but felt like I brushed against something. Looking down at the tiny people waiting below, I picked up my pen again. My hands are still just way too big for this. What if I accidentally stir up a storm and blow them all away? That wouldn't be good. Chapter 17, We Unite. In the Xian Yuan realm, at the foot of Mount Inyan, the cultivators stood together, backed by the few dozen demonic beasts that survived. As for the life of the chicken leg, that was long gone, devoured so completely that not even a single bone remained. Some lucky ones even carried a trace of the ancient phoenix lineage. This made the black wolf feel a surge of pure indignation. Who could have imagined such a bloodline would awaken in a mere beast? When the great one who blots out the sky appears, you must thank him properly. I looked at Island and saw a young girl there with white wings. She was the one who called out to me, possessing the purest bloodline in the world. If you undergo several metamorphoses in the future, you might just make it. You could become a true phoenix. Xiao Xiao nodded, looking up at the sky. Sister, can I be the master's mount? She suddenly asked. Xiao Xiao turned her question toward Hio Kingen, who was inside the house. The girl stood there, waiting for an answer with bated breath. Hio Kingen simply smiled and said, "You're far too small right now. Grow a little more." "How much?" "At least a bit more. You need to be bigger than that chicken leg you just ate." Hio Kingen didn't know how to comfort children, especially those who looked like monsters. But these creatures had suffered enough since their transformation. Usually, it's considered shameful to be someone's mount in this city. But if you cast aside your pride, you can truly become someone great. To get this kind of opportunity, everything changes. After all, dignity doesn't feed you. When Ayu dropped that chicken leg, he realized he was going hungry. I looked at these monsters in disguise. They had long forgotten their past. They didn't even remember what dignity felt like anymore. Momo looked up at the sky and thought, if I knew being a dog was this good, why would I ever want to be a wolf? I used to skip meals constantly, but now I eat until I'm stuffed every single day. Suddenly, the sky darkened as a massive golden hand slowly broke through the clouds. Tian Kong, who had been watching in secret, stood there completely shell-shocked. I thought I had seen it all after witnessing ghosts every day, but this was different. My entire body began to tremble uncontrollably. Just then, that hand covering the sky vanished into thin air. Everyone let out a collective breath of relief. The terrifying pressure was so intense that some of the smaller monsters fainted. After a moment, the sky fell silent once again. Then, two enormous mechanical pillars descended from above. They were smaller than the hand, but these metallic structures were still terrifying. Hio Kingen quickly placed a bag next to the metal pillar. The metal pillar gripped the bag gently and lifted it away. Once the pillar disappeared back into the clouds, no one could stop themselves from taking a deep, shaky breath. The pressure is too much. I feel like my heart is trapped in a vice. It feels like it's about to burst out of my chest. Wait, hold on. Suddenly, Ailey screamed toward the sky and pulled out a circular stone, making my eyes widen. My lord, this is a demonic beast egg left behind by my ancestors. They say it contains the descendants of ancient dragons, my lord. Please accept it. Ailey's desperate words made Bailey freeze right where he sat. I couldn't help but stare at the object. An ancient dragon? I don't know if it's true, but my great-grandfather told me. This is the most precious treasure of my entire life. It is the pride of our half-demon race. The leader of the arid desert sect had run out of information. He stepped forward and whispered, Ada Bai, you don't understand. The half-demon race of this barren land wasn't always like this. They were once a pure demon race before moving to this remote wasteland. Interbreeding between demons and humans eventually gave birth to the half-demons. Over time, they grew into their own distinct ethnic group. As for their origins, our arid desert sect actually holds the most records. We have ancient documents regarding the ancestors of these half-demons. It seems they were originally a force of immense power. Perhaps that egg was stolen during their glory days, before they lost the war and fled here to rot. Bailey looked at her in silence. I didn't expect this little half-demon to have such a prestigious lineage. But looking at that stone, even if it were a real dragon egg, there's no hope of it hatching. It's been stored away for so long that the life inside must have withered away. Now, we are all just servants working for the Lord. Ailey looked back quickly, knowing it didn't matter how glorious her ancestors were. What use is a treasure if we can't even find enough food to eat? That was enough for me. The massive metal pillar that had just ascended to the sky returned to the earth. It began to descend slowly toward the group. Seeing this, Ailey quickly reacted and held the stone egg high above her body. She lifted it over her head as an offering. My metal tweezers gripped the egg gently and pulled it back into the sky. As it disappeared into the clouds, everyone stood there, staring at each other in shock. Then, they all turned their gaze toward Bailey and Ada Bai. Since we have all received the grace of the great sky-covering senior, and we are all stuck in this remote wasteland, why don't we unite? After the brutal battle with the sect elder, everyone finally realized the true threat of war. The danger to this arid land isn't internal, it's the monsters from the outside. Everything was turned upside down. They couldn't just keep waiting around like this. Waiting meant waiting to die, even if the sky-covering senior was watching over them. I had been helping them, but they couldn't run to me every single time they had a problem. They needed more, didn't they? Bailey looked at the disaster surrounding them. Then he looked back at Hyukingen, originally thinking Senior Seishin was his partner. But now it seemed the senior simply didn't care for such things. It didn't matter. Now he just needed to focus on his own path and protect Hyukingen. Fine by me. In the dead of night, Kingen looked at his wife and felt a surge of happiness. He stared up at the sky, missing the senior just a little bit. Since returning to the sect, he hadn't spent any more time with the master. Today felt heavy, like a day marked by death. He remembered seeing me in the desert and everything I had said to him. To him, those words were everything. It was all so new, as vast as the sea itself. It felt as if I were in another world entirely. Just then, Bailey approached from behind. Bailey looked at the sky too, as if reflecting on what was to come. He seemed to be pondering something. Master, he asked, about the senior. Is he truly a great cultivator who can cross the sea? Hearing that, Balin took a deep breath, his mind racing with suspicion. Could the senior be a true immortal? The ultimate dream of every cultivator. But whether in Zantu or Dewan, no one had ever actually ascended. It seemed like ascension was just a lie, and Balin wasn't sure what to believe. But standing before Dao Ju, who else could the senior be but a god among men? Maybe he was an immortal who descended from the clouds to gather strength. Perhaps he was just preparing for his eventual return to the immortal realm. Balin could only guess, remembering a story his own master once told him. The founder of the Daoxian sect was said to be an immortal who fell from the sky. Balin looked at Hukingen and said, "The senior chose you for a reason. He must have seen your talent. Kingen, there is something I haven't told you. You possess the Daogu, the innate bone of the way. Your cultivation speed is nearly double that of a normal person." Hukingen stood there, stunned, as Balin explained the massive energy his body required. "You are different. You don't face the bottlenecks that stop others. As long as you have resources, you can ascend without lightning tribulations or inner demons. I believe this is why the senior favored you in the first place. Cultivate well, and one day, you will be a pillar of strength for him. One day, you might be the one who helps that senior return to the immortal realm. Just like the founder of Swanson, who wanted his disciple to lead him back home. In the end, he failed because immortals are fundamentally different from us. For cultivators like us, every action is bound by the laws of cause and effect. The more powerful an immortal becomes, the heavier that burden grows. They carry the weight of the world's karma on their shoulders. The more they interfere, the more backlash and calamities they must endure. It leads to a constant decline in their strength, even in the heat of battle. Eventually, it leads to death. At least, that's what my master told me. Kingen, the senior has already defied the heavens for your sake. He has already taken on a massive amount of your karma. Immortals cannot act on a whim, or the entire world would fall into chaos. Yet, this senior continues to intervene specifically for you. Why would he shoulder so much risk for a single person? He has saved your life repeatedly, so you must grow stronger now. You need to become someone who can actually help him return to the immortal realm. In the future, try not to ask him for help every time things get difficult. He shouldn't have to suffer the cosmic backlash of cause and effect for us." Balin sighed, finally revealing the secrets he had kept hidden for years. He looked at Hukingen and began to speak about the boy's mother. It turned out Balin's own master was the daughter of the Daoxian sect leader. Her name was Luo Yu, and she had ventured into the Sea of Calamity long ago. She gave birth to Hukingen after fleeing with her husband. At that moment, it triggered a massive backlash from the world. No one knew who the holy maiden of the Daoxian sect had been impregnated by. But after Hukingen was born, a trace of demonic energy leaked out. Suddenly, everyone realized the truth about the holy maiden. She had actually coupled with a member of the primordial demon clan, a clan that had been systematically wiped out by the various righteous sects. Hundreds of thousands of years have passed since that purge. The few demonic survivors left in this world live like rats in the gutter. They live miserable lives, because demons and humans are mortal enemies. The holy maiden of a top righteous alliance sect sleeping with a demon caused a scandal. Everyone knows the demon race hasn't been a threat since the creation era. But hatred is still hatred. The blood feud had faded, but the Orthodox monks used it as an excuse to pressure the palace. They wanted to use this scandal to dismantle the power of the Daoxian palace. The sect leader, Luo Buven, was growing old and weak. He had been stuck in the god transformation stage for 7,000 years with no progress. He had lost his prestige, yet he was desperate to keep his position. He needed sect resources to keep his cultivation alive, so he chose to sell out his daughter. Luo Yu realized her father and the monks would never let her go, so she fled to a convent. I watched as the Daoxian palace began to fracture from that moment on. Your mother knew your life would be an eternal struggle the moment you were born. She begged me to take you away so they wouldn't steal your natural Dao bones. She needed me to get you as far away from Zhongtu as possible. So I came to this desolate land where the aura is thin and resources are scarce, but safe. Balan reached out and gently touched Hukingen's head. But after 20 years, they still managed to sniff out your Dao bones. Hukingen's mind went completely blank at the revelation. She was the daughter of a holy maiden, a descendant of demons, and a natural Dao prodigy. Meeting the elder, Zetian, was the only thing that saved her from total disaster. I've been looking over my shoulder for 20 years, but today I can finally breathe. With Elder Zetian here, I might not survive, but Hukingen definitely will. I stood there stunned by the sheer weight of Hukingen's past. How could one girl's origin be this twisted and complicated? Natural Dao bones sound incredibly powerful, even to the eyes of these so-called immortals. To them, I am an immortal, yet I've interfered so much without facing any karmic retribution. I pushed those thoughts aside and looked at the items I had brought back with me. They were still far too small for me to use, and I saw it was nearly midnight. I slapped my cheeks to stay awake and stared at the objects on the table as time crawled by. I played on my phone until 6 in the morning when the items finally returned to their full size. Slowly, the transformation finished. I quickly dropped my phone and stared at the items emerging from the glass box. First, a storage bag appeared. Then came the floating stones and the 7 swords. These were the flying blades belonging to the 7th elder. Hukingen told me they were all high-quality magical weapons. Since the 7th elder was dead, these weapons were now masterless. I only needed to drop a bit of blood on them to activate them. Besides the weapons, there was a basic cultivation manual called Wang Chunhui. It was a very entry-level book for beginners. To them, it wasn't valuable at all, but I had taken the initiative to ask Hyukingen for it myself. I wanted to cultivate immortality in the real world. Immortals don't get cancer, right? I opened the manual and began to study. You don't actually need to read these manuals. You just hold them to your forehead. The knowledge flows directly into your brain, though some parts still confused me. I kept asking Hyukingen questions, and though she looked puzzled by my basic inquiries, she never refused. She probably thought I just wanted an excuse to talk to her more. A whole month passed like this, and I didn't leave the house even once. The delivery guy practically memorized my address, and I hadn't worked this hard since high school. It was actually quite easy to understand. I had the double guidance of both Hyukingen and Belan. IU, had fully grasped the concepts. During this time, Belan also took the lead outside. The demons and cultivators began rebuilding their homes together. They worked on the mountain in the original Yuan, the ancestral land of the half-demon clan, building on a massive scale. To put it bluntly, those cultivators were losers who just needed a place to live and practice. After a month of hard labor, the half-demon clan finally looked like a community again. It still looked a bit desolate, but at least it had a proper shape. Every morning at sunrise, they would look up and worship the sky. Honestly, I was so focused on my own cultivation that I barely paid them any mind. I just tossed them some meat every now and then to keep them going. I didn't expect that this small gesture would actually train them into a loyal force. Now, Eileen's wolf tail wags faster than a common dog's whenever I'm around. It seems no matter what world you go to, food is the ultimate motivator. Being the great mother of this world really makes a difference. Yes, have I explained everything clearly enough? Hyukingen asked. She stood on a high hill and spoke to me slowly. She had explained every single detail of what had happened to me, IU. She had laid out the entire workbook for me. I looked at her and gave her my sincere thanks. Elder, what are you talking about? She asked, sounding confused. How could an immortal not know these basic skills? She must think I'm just testing her. Over the past month, all that porridge had turned into something incredible. It was as if they were being fed by the sun itself. The spiritual energy was overflowing. Combined with my hard work, my cultivation reached a new peak. I had successfully hit the 19th level of chi refining. Others only need 10 levels to break through, but my requirements are much higher. I need to reach 20 levels. Then there's Daoju. His progress seems painfully slow on the surface, but with the sun's help, his foundation is terrifying. At just the 7th level, he can already challenge late-stage foundation establishment experts. Plus, he doesn't hit any bottlenecks. Breaking through is never an issue for him. His future is bright, a potential that simply cannot be ignored. He will be a great help to you, Elder, Hyukingen said, stepping back. But before I could respond, a massive group of cultivators appeared on the horizon. Suddenly, the area around the mountain, which was originally empty, began to fill with half-demons. They gathered like a shadow covering the earth. Every single one of those half-demons held scraps of paper in their hands. Terrified of forgetting what they heard, even Bailing approached Hyukingen quietly. She held a pen in her hand, looking ready to take notes. She looked like a model student. Originally, Ayu had finished her own studies. Watching Hyukingen explain cultivation all day was starting to bore her. So, she started telling Hyukingen about the web novels she was reading. He had never seen such emotional manipulation or flashy displays of power. Hyukingen was instantly hooked. They reached a deal. Hyukingen would explain cultivation techniques to the group, and in exchange, Ayu would tell him more stories. But the details leaked to Bailing, and soon the whole city knew. The problem was, they took the fiction as absolute truth. They believed these stories were the ancient history of the great Zutian land. Ayu wanted to clear up the misunderstanding, but Hyukingen stopped her. He thought it was better this way. There was no need to explain, so I just opened my phone. I sighed, feeling helpless, and opened the novel on my screen. It said that Xiao Guogua had just climbed the cliff when he saw the little fairy doctor. She stood there watching him, her presence taking his breath away. Ayu lowered her voice, terrified that others might overhear a single word. In the end, only Hyukingen could hear her clearly. It was Ayu's voice, soft and private. But Hyukingen had learned a specific spell from Bailing, a technique that could amplify the sounds of the heart for everyone to hear. The content still came from Ayu, even if she didn't realize it. The voice the crowd heard was Hyukingen's, booming out for half an hour. When Ayu finally stopped talking, the crowd dispersed with heavy hearts. They walked away discussing the story, proving that a single day with the senior was full of wonders. The 3-year promise. I can't wait to hear the rest of it, one said. Do you think there's a chance for me too? Another asked. Could I find a ring with a powerful elder living inside? Sure, go jump off a cliff then. I'll take care of your wife and kids, his friend joked. Not far away, the group from the Tiankong sect hurried off. Once they were safely away from the others, Tiankin rushed home and grabbed some paper. He had to record everything he just heard about this Xiao Guogua. Was that really the name of a Lord of Xishan? No, it had to be a pseudonym. The Elder in the Ring. Could it be that the Lord of Xishan himself relies on the guidance of such a powerful old man? It has to be. There's no other explanation. Tiankin muttered to himself as he scribbled furiously, filling the pages with dense notes and observations. He tried to process the story, but the world I described felt completely alien compared to the Xianyuan world. Could this lord actually be from another realm entirely? beyond the vast empires and the distant lands of the West. Are there truly other cultivation worlds out there? In the past, Xian Yuan had seen monks arrive from beyond the stars. Even the demon race came from another world among the myriads. But there is only one immortal realm where all paths eventually meet. This celestial senior is as powerful as the heavens themselves. He must have known I was eavesdropping from the shadows. Yet, I didn't stop him. Tiankin looked up at the sky and bowed. He pressed his hands together in a gesture of profound respect. Celestial Senior, this junior wishes to record your wisdom, he whispered. He wanted to turn my story into a scripture for all cultivators to read, a guide for those who started with nothing and rose to the top. He joined the sect, understanding the full life of a great cultivator. How important is that for a novice cultivator? Grasping the life of a master can lead to breakthroughs for anyone. Just watching a great cultivator's battle can be life-changing. As a casual cultivator, he wants to seek a better path for his peers. He's come to listen every day for a month to spread my deeds. He hopes other casual cultivators can hear my story. He wants them to understand the path I've walked. There was no response from the sky for a long time. I clearly realized he was watching, but I didn't reject him. Tiankin took my silence as tacit permission and thanked the heavens. Now, he needed a name for this legendary record. Using my title directly felt too bold for him. He dismissed several titles, deep in thought. Suddenly, an idea struck him. Every time I made a move, I tore through the sky from above, like a golden hand ripping through the very fabric of the world. The sky is the firmament, and to tear it is to break it. I have it, he whispered. That will be the name. Tiankin wrote 4 elegant characters on the paper, shattering the firmament. Tiankin stared at the title he had written with a sigh. The more he looked at it, the more satisfied he felt, before vanishing into the night. He headed straight for the mid-mountain path. He had spent his entire life working the markets for the sect. But now, he wanted to do something meaningful for his fellow cultivators. For those independent souls struggling on their own. A few days later, outside the glass box, I watched Hong Yu hang up the phone. His intelligence gathering was finally over, and he looked exhausted. Reading novels is a joy, but reading them for others is pure torture. Hong Yu picked up the most basic storage bag sitting on the table. Because its spiritual requirement is so low, even mortals can use it. It's a common tool in the Republic. The space inside is tiny, barely holding a few low-grade snacks. Even though the Great Desolation isn't a wealthy place, I can still afford some basic treats if I want to keep cultivating. To grow, you must absorb spiritual energy, but this world has none. The only way to get it is by consuming it directly. It's a disappointing reality for anyone trying to advance. I felt a bit dejected by the situation. I looked down at the world inside the box, wondering what I should do next. I thought to myself, almost there. 7 days left. Hong Yu pulled a snack out from the food pile. He took a long look at his surroundings. He was deep in thought. He put it back, realizing that even though this place is far from the city center, being surrounded by residents in the city would only cause trouble. It would be a mess, but right then, Hong Yu's phone rang. Hey, what's up, brother? It was Lian calling. Let's grab a drink. It's been way too long, man. All right, he replied as the calls kept coming in. That's how men are. Any call over a minute is considered long. He looked at the 7 flying swords. Hong Yu decided to put them all in the same place, right into the storage bag. My only regret is that the glass box itself. It can't be tucked away in a storage bag. This month, Hong Yu felt the weight of the situation. The box was a burden, and he planned to move elsewhere within a year. For now, to keep the glass box safe, he'd have to settle for this. Much later, Hong Yu arrived at the barbecue grill in front of my residential complex. It was already dark out, and business was booming. Lian was already sitting there, waiting for me. He'd clearly come looking for a drinking buddy. I sat down across from him and noticed something immediately. There was only Coke on the table. No alcohol in sight. I'm watching my health lately, so I'm not drinking, Lian said. He handed me a bottle of Coke instead of a glass of liquor. Then he took a huge gulp and blurted out, Brother, I'm getting married. I almost spat out my drink. It had only been a month. The god statue in the Taoist temple was sealed off, he continued. Someone reported it for spreading superstitions, and now I'm unemployed. Who the hell reports a Taoist temple for feudal superstitions? Lian took another massive swig of his soda, looking miserable. My family doesn't want me doing anything, so they set me up with a rich girl. They say she's going to support me. I couldn't tell if my cousin was bragging or complaining. I worked in engineering for 8 years, and now they're forcing me back home. I realized it then. He was definitely complaining. My cousin worked on a construction site for months, and that environment, how do I even describe it? You work, you finish, you sleep, no days off, and you only get paid every 3 months. Asking for leave is impossible, but those monks managed it, didn't they? Master Jin San is actually quite impressive, even if he's just a CEO of some listed company now. He built the Wangyang Palace with nothing but his own skills. Lian downed another can of Coke and let out a loud burp. It's those rich people, he muttered, especially the ones with too much money and nothing to do. The ones who made their fortune through dirty means, damn them, they're all so happy. He watched the groups of young people rushing toward the temple grounds. They're afraid of ruining Buddha's aura, so they report us directly. Those people have real power. We're just a tiny Taoist temple. How are we supposed to resist? Even the Taoist Association couldn't help. I finally understood the situation. Plenty of people feel restless after making dirty money, so they run to Buddha for a blessing. Donating cash is the only way they can sleep at night. That's exactly why temple incense is such a booming business lately. Wait, I said, I remember the crowds at your temple being pretty decent. Wasn't it easy for you guys? Leanne looked at me and sighed. That was all just temporary hype. Our temple doesn't have deep roots, and once the trend passes, it's over. Who's going to show up once the social media traffic dies down? The internet comes fast and leaves even faster, and kids these days are actually pretty rational. Nobody actually believes that Wang Yi has some divine connection. They just show up to join the hype. They snap a photo, post it to their feed, and that's it. But let's not talk about that anymore. Leanne swallowed a lamb skewer whole, practically skipping the chewing part. He tossed the wooden stick aside. Brother, do you just not want to get married? Or do you actually want to be free? I was stuck on that construction site for 8 years. Even prisoners get more fresh air than I did. We kept chatting casually as the night went on. What about you? Found a job? Are you doing social media or filming short clips or something? Over the last month, I had occasionally filmed snippets of the scenes inside my glass box. I couldn't post them under my real name, so I just treated it like a weekly photography hobby. By the end of the month, my account had grown by 300%. I had managed to pull in over 30,000 followers. I don't post frequently, maybe once every 10 days, but I finally cracked the viral code. I discovered that the views exploded whenever I recorded the half-human demons. The videos featuring the cat demons and fox demons were on another level. The play count was insane, and honestly, the aesthetics of those half-humans played a huge part. The visuals were truly shocking, especially that one half-fox demon who didn't even have to do anything. She was just sitting there, brushing her hair, and the internet went wild. That video was over 10 seconds long. It racked up nearly 5 million views. The comments were flooded with people begging to see the fox maiden bathing. Some big spenders even sent DMs trying to track her down in the real world. They were asking for custom content. They were offering plots and quotes in units of $10,000. It just goes to show, I'm not the pervert, this whole world is. Too bad for them, my standards are higher now. I don't care about social media money. Leanne and I kept talking for 2 full hours. We had more to say than words could even cover. We covered everything from marriage and having kids, to the state of the world. I'm heading out, just remember to come to the wedding. I can't get out of it this time, brother. You're better off staying single. Trust me, marriage is a cage. Leanne patted my shoulder and looked at the sky, longing for freedom. He was being a bit dramatic, but he said I'd understand when I reached his age. Leanne left in a taxi, his mouth still moving as he rambled on. It was almost dawn, so I headed to the station to go to Van Bay Mountain. I figured I'd make some easy money while I was at it. The 20th thunder rumbled just as I arrived at Banda Mountain. By the time I reached the mountain, it was already noon. I found the Taoist temple, and sure enough, it had been shut down. But the closure was incredibly lazy and superficial. They had only put up a few strips of plastic tape with no one watching the entrance. People were even walking right inside without a care. It was clear the officials knew the report against this place was total nonsense. They weren't taking the enforcement seriously at all. Even with the temple closed, I still saw plenty of people praying outside the gates. Leanne was right, though. The crowd was nothing like last month. I took advantage of the quiet to review my spring observation technique. I couldn't afford to mess up when the moment finally came. I double-checked my gear, 100 snacks and 700 high-grade spirit stones. I had the stone eggs with me too, though they hadn't been useful yet. The mysterious blood was still there, pulsing with energy. Everything was ready. Now, I just had to wait for nightfall. You're Leanne's brother, aren't you? An old man in Taoist robes asked, approaching me. I turned around and recognized him. It was Leanne's master from my last visit. Yes, I replied. Does the Taoist master have some advice for me? He laughed and told me not to be so formal in this day and age. He told me Leanne was a good kid, but at 30, he needed to find a real path. He told me Leanne just likes Taoist culture. But it's different for people like us. We want that legendary immortal life. I thought about the novels, but if Taoism really had immortals, how could it have fallen this far? Maybe they don't exist, but then I remembered what happened last time. Not many people caught it on film, but the old man looked at me with a strange glint in his eye. He shook his head and muttered that it was all just a passing phase. He told me to forget it, saying he was retiring next month anyway. With the temple gone, he asked, how could he even call himself a Taoist anymore? He handed me an envelope and asked me to give Leanne his final month's salary. The old man didn't use a cell phone, so he had to do things the old-fashioned way before walking off. I tucked the envelope away and stared at the sky until midnight finally arrived. It was time, so I stood up, brushed the dust off my clothes, and headed into the woods. I stopped when the timing felt right, opened my storage bag, and pulled out a piece of jade. Inside the translucent stone, thick strands of mysterious blood flowed like they were alive. Hyukingen's mother had brought this wonder back from the Sea of Calamity. It was a miracle of heaven and earth, capable of defying destiny itself. It could grant spiritual roots to a mortal who had none, or turn an ordinary base into an extraordinary talent. Even in the Xian Yuan realm, a treasure that improves one's very nature is incredibly rare. Originally, Bailing had a different plan for this blood. She was going to wait until Hyukingen reached a stable foundation before using it. She intended to give it to her son, but to thank me, she handed it over instead. Now, it was my turn to use it. I didn't even know if I had spiritual roots, since I had no way to measure them myself. But it didn't matter. Once I absorbed this mysterious blood, I'd have my chance. I took a deep breath, braced myself, and shattered the jade. The red liquid spilled onto my arm and began sinking into my skin immediately. In just 10 seconds, the essence integrated completely into my body. Boom, boom, my heart hammered so loudly it echoed through the entire forest. A massive surge of energy began washing through my veins like a tidal wave. I quickly activated my technique to digest this terrifying power. I used the Eternal Spring formula as my foundation. It required 6 small cycles and 3 great cycles of circulation. That meant completing a total of 18 circuits through my system. I sat down cross-legged right there on the forest floor. I focused every ounce of my will on the task at hand. I guided the wild energy, forcing it to follow my command. I pushed the power through the specific paths of the Eternal Peace circuit. The energy of the Eternal Spring surged within me. Suddenly, I felt a metallic sweetness rise up from my chest to my throat. A mouthful of blood rushed into my mouth, but I forced myself to swallow it back down. Something was definitely wrong. Balan had told me that this blood was vast and powerful. She said even mortals could use it to defy their own destinies. It was supposed to put fate within anyone's reach, but I wasn't just any mortal from her world. I was clearly different from the people of her realm. The mortals of the Xin Yuan world are raised surrounded by spiritual energy. Their bodies are naturally conditioned by that ambient spiritual force. For me, this power was proving to be far too ferocious. I couldn't take the pressure anymore. A low groan escaped my lips as my skin began to crack. I quickly pulled out the 7 flying swords and laid them before me. I sliced my arm and sprayed my blood directly onto the blades. The 7 flying swords instantly hummed as they recognized me as their master. A massive amount of that manic energy began to drain out of me. The violent power started to redistribute itself. It flowed out from my body and into the weapons. Sharing the burden with the 7 swords made me feel significantly better. But the power of the swan blood was still constantly battering my internal organs. It was overflowing, pushing me toward the first level of chi refinement. First level, second level, third level of chi refinement. I could feel it clearly. My strength was rising at a steady, unstoppable pace. Even without me consciously operating my cultivation technique, the process began to move on its own. It was operating frantically. 7th level, 8th level, 9th level. It didn't stop. Then, I realized something. The swan blood was actively forcing my body to cultivate. I reached the 10th level of chi refinement. Boom, boom, boom. The sky, which had been bright with moonlight, was instantly covered. Dark clouds swirled above as the swan blood energy overflowed from my body. The power was so intense, it was becoming visible to the naked eye. It began to affect the weather of the entire city. In just 30 seconds, thunder roared through the sky. Lightning rolled constantly through the black clouds. Didn't the weather forecast say it wouldn't rain for the next 7 days? How can they still not predict the weather accurately in this day and age? A few people who were camping nearby slowly crawled out of their tents. They started panicking and packing their things as fast as they could. The wind howled and the thunder shook the mountain like a coming apocalypse. Suddenly, someone pointed at the sky and screamed, "Look at that." Over there, near the Taoist temple, people were staring in disbelief. They were all holding recording equipment. Everyone stood there, stunned, looking up at the sky above the temple. A bolt of lightning tore through the sky, revealing a human silhouette. Floating in midair, I was struck directly by the lightning bolt. In the flash of the lightning, they saw it clearly. It was a human figure, and floating all around me were 7 shadows. They were shaped like swords, hovering in place. The witnesses were too shocked to speak, wondering if it was a hallucination. Another bolt of lightning illuminated the entire world. My shadow became even clearer against the sky and the earth. In just 1 minute, 7 lightning bolts had struck the city, and my figure was flying higher and higher into the storm. The scene was so striking that no one in the city could miss it. Under the glow of the lightning, my form on Banjin Mountain became undeniable. Is someone really undergoing a heavenly tribulation right now? I knew I saw someone flying earlier. Someone is ascending on Banjin Mountain. These aren't special effects or a fake video. The whole city saw it with their own eyes. A human figure in the middle of the thunder, taking the hits. I was struck repeatedly by the lightning, but the real shock was what surrounded me. 7 sword shadows were floating in the air. What on earth was this? Flying swords? The entire city of Tian was reaching a breaking point. Then, the 9th bolt of lightning crashed down. The dark clouds slowly began to scatter, and the world finally fell silent. The moon reappeared, and everything returned to exactly how it was before. The entire storm had lasted barely 15 minutes, coming and going in a flash. But the impact it left behind was unlike anything the city had ever seen. That particular moment was the one I enjoyed the most. My figure vanished, but that night, countless people flooded into the city. They swarmed Banjin Mountain until the Taoist temple was practically overflowing. The crowd was so massive the building nearly collapsed, and they even hunted down the priest. They found him resting at a hotel and nearly gave the poor man a heart attack. "What lightning tribulation?" he stammered. "You people need to believe in science. Fortunately, the government finally intervened and forced the crowds to disperse. One of the officials coughed nervously and approached the priest. He couldn't believe the man had actually been at a leisure bar during the chaos. The official took a deep breath and looked the priest in the eye. Taoist priest, the state has never stopped subsidizing your temple over the years. We need answers, priest. Damn. Chapter 21. I'm not just some piece of meat. Up there, my form shifted constantly in the midair. My body turned illusory before vanishing completely, a common trick in the Xianjun realm. With the reverse book, this magic was simple enough to learn in one sitting. It's really only good for fooling mortals, but for me, it was plenty. Honestly, I didn't expect to cause such a massive scene. I was just trying to draw people's attention back to the Taoist temple like last time. I just wanted to make sure my cousin kept his job. I never imagined that reaching the foundation establishment stage would trigger a lightning tribulation. But then again, Earth has no spiritual aura. That lightning looked fierce, but it wasn't the real deal. It was just ordinary lightning formed by the overflow of my Xian blood energy. It had the shape of a tribulation, but none of the true power. If that had been a real Xianjun realm thunderbolt, I wouldn't have survived it. I couldn't help but laugh at the sheer power surging through me. The Xian blood allowed me to skip the body refining stage entirely. I jumped straight to foundation establishment, and I could feel the difference in every fiber. I could even control my aura with enough precision to kill a single cell. My new foundation establishment body was on a completely different level. I was already leagues beyond any ordinary human being. In this life, I can finally say goodbye to all sickness and disease. I slowed down, floating silently over the city of Tyne. Looking at the traffic below, I saw thousands of people struggling for money. Dark thoughts began to swirl in the back of my mind. I realized that if a person obtains invincible power in this world, the darkness in their heart will expand without limit. I thought about my life back in Fujota. Was it possible for me to just do whatever I wanted now? To walk over everyone? No, that sounded like too much trouble. I shook my head to clear those thoughts and flew straight back home. Only a madman would want to rule the world. I just wanted to lie in bed and check my phone. I wanted to see how badly Hugh Kingen and the others were screwing up right now. My original goal for cultivating was simply to cure my own illness. Now that the disease is gone, it's time for me to actually enjoy my life. It wasn't long before I made it back inside my house. I let out a long sigh of relief. This is the life. I collapsed onto the sofa, feeling more relaxed than I ever have in my entire life. The pain was gone, and suddenly, everything in the world looked beautiful. Then, I waved my hand, and those 7 flying ships began to shrink down. They shrank from the size of a thumb back to their original form once I claimed ownership. As their new master, I finally accessed the data on these flying vessels. These are the 7 leaf instrument ships of the 7th Elder. In reality, these 7 ships function as a single, unified entity. The advantage is simple. Controlling all 7 is as easy as controlling one. I can deploy the entire fleet without needing any extra energy. But the disadvantage is just as obvious. If even one ship is damaged, all 7 will simultaneously self-destruct. It's a shame, really. I've only ever seen things like this in videos. Only a vessel with a true aura has the chance to give birth to a ship spirit. This set is merely a high-grade, human magical artifact. It's top tier, but it's still missing that final level of consciousness. Then, my eyes drifted toward that solid, mysterious egg. I honestly had no idea how to use this thing Ban Yao gave me. It looks exactly like an egg, but it's completely petrified. I stared at it, wondering, what are you actually good for? I picked it up and tried to inject some of my aura into it. There was no reaction at all, despite what Ban Zhao told me. He said this thing needs to be hatched, but it's been sitting there for 1,000 years. In all those centuries, not a single member of his tribe could make it stir. After thinking it over, I decided to give Liang a call. He answered, sounding completely dazed and confused. I could tell my cousin was still drinking, but I cut straight to the point. I told him, brother, I have this egg and no idea what it is. How do I hatch it? The shock snapped Liang out of his drunken stupor instantly. I told him I hadn't started a farm or anything. I just found it. I explained that I just wanted to hatch it to see what was inside, mostly for fun. Liang let out a sigh of relief. He warned me that the animal breeding business is a bottomless money pit. He told me to just go out and buy a standard incubator. They don't cost much, but I had my doubts about a machine like that. Would a regular incubator really work on something this ancient? I looked down at the petrified egg in my hand and felt it shift slightly. I figured it was worth a shot, so I told him thanks and to check the news. Liang was left staring at his phone, wondering what I meant by getting rich. He was still confused, unable to make sense of my cryptic parting words. He opened his news app, and his eyes nearly popped out of his head. The headline was terrifying. Mysterious shadow appears under storm clouds. The reports were all coming from Bankin Mountain. The viral videos clearly showed 9 massive lightning bolts striking the peak. Every single bolt struck a figure floating high in the air. 7 spectral sword shadows circled the figure like a divine trial. Liang stared at his screen, wondering if true cultivators actually existed. It was too obvious, twice in the same spot. It couldn't just be a coincidence. Had humanity secretly evolved while no one was looking? Or maybe the world's spiritual energy was finally waking up. Liang turned off his phone, his mind racing with a single thought. It seemed like Taoism was about to make a massive comeback. And sure enough, the rumors started flying the very next day. Liang heard that the biggest conglomerate in Tian City was making a move. They were donating $1 million to renovate the old Taoist temple in Guizhou. It occurred to me that people were starting to feel a shift in the world. Others followed suit, because nothing is more convincing than seeing it yourself. Even if it was just a freak atmospheric phenomenon, they were betting on it. They were willing to pay for a piece of that divine providence. But before Liang could celebrate, a group of uniformed men blocked his path. "Are you Liang? Come with us, your master is waiting for you." Meanwhile, I searched the internet for incubators, seeing prices from thousands to millions. Some were high-end industrial cases meant for rare species. Others were dirt cheap, but I knew I couldn't cut corners on this. Since it was a dragon egg, I reluctantly bought a hatching incubator for over $1,000. After setting up the tech, I checked the monitoring app on my phone. With the dragon egg secure, I turned my attention back to the crystal box. Inside, a group of half-demons were busy tilling the soil and planting spiritual herbs. These were the most common types of spiritual plants available. They were designed to absorb the spiritual energy lingering in the human world. They pull energy from the depths of the earth, process it, and release it. Both the half-demons and the cultivators of the Greek emperor use this method. It's the standard way to cultivate spiritual resources. I watched them work on the plantation. Without these plants, the environment would be even worse, but things have improved lately. I noticed they were intentionally mixing something extra into the half-demon supplies. They were tampering with the fertilizer to boost the yield. Now the survival rate of the spiritual herbs is sitting at about 30%. To be honest, the lives of these cultivators are actually quite tragic. They don't even compare to Georgian fun. It's almost enough to make me feel sorry for them. I tried to stay sensible, remembering that last year this only cost 3 pesos. Just 3 low-grade spiritual stones for the whole lot. Why does it cost 10 today? Ilya's roar echoed through the area. His outburst drew everyone's eyes to the 2 dusty cultivators standing right in front of him. They looked particularly vast and imposing. Then a voice cut through. "Hello, it's Carlos." I wondered, has my image already been forgotten? The sect of 10,000 spirits is a specific kind of group. They're a small sect that maintains contact with the Republic's government. They serve under the great Emperor Isaias. Their specialty is using the carcasses of demonic beasts. They refine them into fertilizers to help spiritual herbs grow in harsh environments. The more refined the fertilizer, the better the results. "You're talking nonsense," Ilya snapped. "Only the 10,000 spirits sect buys this stuff. The output shouldn't be dropping, yet these 2 cultivators looked incredibly shady." Seeing Ilya call them out, they stopped pretending. "Look, do you want to buy it or not?" one of them challenged. The cultivator glanced at Balan standing next to Ilya and visibly flinched. He clearly didn't expect to see the sect master hanging out with a half-demon. It seems the rumors about the recent battle were true. Either sect master Bai or the Holy King has taken these half-demons in like dogs. The scale of that battle was simply too massive to ignore. Even remote groups like the 10,000 Spirits sect took notice. But they've guessed wrong, thinking we were just ordinary cultivators. Balan didn't bother explaining the truth about the current half-demons. In a way, they really are acting like loyal dogs, willing to die for the cause. To be honest, the cultivator said, "These demonic beast bones are very valuable." He explained that under the Great Emperor, it's not just half-demons who need fertilizer. Human cultivators need it for their crops just as much. The cultivator pointed at the massive, tree-like bones buried in the distance. Those were the remains of the giant fish the toad dropped last time, now just a skeleton. Leaving them on the ground like that is a total waste of potential spiritual herbs. Since the herbs can't absorb the nutrients from raw bone, we should refine it for you. We can produce a fertilizer with an effectiveness that is truly staggering. Maybe even the great sects will come to buy it, he added, making Balan pause. I realized he was right. We can't use these ancient bones or absorb their nutrients directly. Fine, so what do we get out of this mutual benefit? Balan asked, surprising the man. What do you get? The fertilizer, obviously, he said, opening his storage bag. He piled up a mountain of refined fertilizer that spiritual herbs could actually digest. Balan took a deep breath and asked, "Are you saying that you want us to use this extraordinary spiritual herb fertilizer?" Exactly, and don't worry, the cultivator replied with a grin. This time, we won't even charge you for the snacks. I nearly burst out laughing at the sheer absurdity of this cult's offer. The demonic beast meat our predecessor gave us was high-grade stuff. It came from the Sea of Calamity, and even the bones were priceless treasures. Refining those bones into fertilizer would create something legendary. If he offered to split the profit, it might actually be a mutual benefit. But this guy wants to swallow the whole prize for himself. He's trying to trick us into giving it up without paying a single cent. Does he really think Balan is too stupid to know what those bones are worth? Get lost, Balan snapped, leaving the cultivator completely stunned. He scrambled back, realizing his bluff had been called. He started retreating toward the exit as fast as his legs could carry him. But he couldn't help shouting back one last time. Sovereign Bai, don't be angry. I'll be back in 3 days. Besides us, you have no other choice for spiritual fertilizer in the great wasteland. I watched from outside the glass box, my teeth aching with pure hatred for that man. He's so incredibly despicable, but then I noticed something wrong with Hyukingen. She hadn't moved an inch since the cultivator arrived, sitting perfectly still. Suddenly, her entire body began to tremble, and the earth pearl vibrated violently. The ground beneath us started to shake, and Belan sensed the anomaly immediately. She acted fast, ordering everyone nearby to clear the area at once. Belan rushed to Hyukingen's side and pressed a medicinal pill into her hand. Then she pressed her hands firmly against Hyukingen's shoulders. I watched as she began channeling her own power into her. A massive vortex of spiritual energy started swirling around Hyukingen's body. Belan didn't stop, pouring every ounce of her essence into the girl. After half an hour of intense cultivation, Belan's face turned deathly pale. But then Hyukingen snapped her eyes open and cried out, "Master, I've done it." After 10 long years of practice, she finally broke through level 20 of her technique. She didn't even need a foundation establishment pill to reach this height. For someone with a Tao body like hers, bottlenecks simply don't exist. Belan smiled with pure relief, even as her strength began to fail her. Hyukingen noticed her master's weakness immediately and rushed to her side. She reached out and quickly helped Belan steady herself. "It's all right," Belan whispered, trying to catch her breath. "We still have plenty of that high-grade demonic beast meat left. The meat our predecessor gave us is packed with spiritual essence. I'll just go eat some and recover my strength in no time." But let's be honest about the situation here. There is still far too little spiritual energy available in the Great Wasteland. Even absorbing energy from meat takes time that we don't always have. Suddenly, I realized that this scene wasn't just about recovery, it was a revelation. Everything had changed, and looking at it from a human perspective, my field of vision used to be limited to just 300 meters. But now, standing near Hyukingen, I could see the entire city. My sight stretched out for over 1,000 meters in every direction. I understood the truth instantly. My vision of this world was directly tied to Hyukingen's own cultivation level. As long as her power continues to rise, my reach will grow with it. Perhaps one day I'll see the entire suspended realm and everyone in it. Just thinking about that possibility made my blood race with excitement. Chapter 22. This land is vital, but I've run into a few new problems lately. I've started my own cultivation, and it's an incredibly time-consuming process. I can't keep my eyes glued to Hyukingen every second of the day. What happens if she's attacked while I'm busy elsewhere? I decided I had to properly strengthen these little people myself. They need to become a force that doesn't rely on my constant protection. Do they just need more spiritual energy? I decided to find out. Hyukingen listened intently to the instructions I gave her. She looked up toward me and spoke with total devotion. "Senior, what is it you need me to do over there?" The crowd fell silent instantly, wondering what else they could plant besides spirit herbs. Hyukingen immediately relayed my questions to the people. Everyone listened intently to the woman's words, hanging on every syllable. They scrambled to discuss my offer, knowing each sect still guarded a few secret seeds. They had spiritual items bought from merchants and traveling cults, treasures meant to act as catalysts from the central continent. But this great desolation was too poor for anything but basic spirit herbs to grow. It was a vicious cycle. Without spiritual energy, nothing would grow. And without spiritual plants, the energy in the air could never accumulate. So they were forced to plant those herbs desperately. They were just hoping to break the cycle, but it never worked. Even if they planted them, they lacked the fertilizer from the Venosa sect. Without that specific nourishment, those spirit herbs usually couldn't even survive. That's why the Banlin sect was so arrogant. They controlled the supply. They weren't afraid of anyone. They didn't think anyone else had a choice. I decided to try a different approach, something more ancient and powerful. The joy in everyone's eyes was fantastic to see. It was visible to the naked eye as Hyukingen promised to try my new method. Was there any doubt? If I was the one trying it, it would definitely work. If they could just change the very sun above them, the people of the Great Desolation wouldn't have to live so frugally. But Hyukingen couldn't bring himself to celebrate yet. He knew that every time I spoke, a massive weight of karma followed. An action like transforming an entire land would bring immense benefits, but the cost was steep. He looked at me, worried, and said, "Senior, you don't need to do this. We can endure. We can survive on the thin spiritual meat from the sea." He didn't realize that for me, improving their lives was a necessity, not a burden. Hearing Hyukingen speak, the others suddenly felt they were being too greedy. I looked at him and thought, for you it's worth it. I closed the crystal box and walked out of the room without another word. To me, Hyukingen was important enough to justify any sacrifice. I only hoped he could grow strong quickly so he could stand on his own. Hyukingen's heart began to race violently, his entire face turning bright red. The crowd stood there dumbfounded by my declaration. They finally understood the weight of everything I had done for them. It was all for Hyukingen's sake, a realization that left them breathless. Ailey hurriedly covered her small ears and whispered, "Don't look at this, little one." At the same time, she couldn't help but marvel at the situation unfolding. She sighed inwardly, thinking how lucky Hyukingen was to have my protection. It had come to this. No wonder Hyukingen was the only one allowed to hear my voice from the start. "I am the great hidden heaven, and you shouldn't be looking either." Ailey barked a sharp command at a nearby demon. Standing right behind her was the demon tiger, Antonio. He growled, "Ailey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" The demon tiger let out a massive roar, only to be slammed down by a wooden claw. Lindy pinned him to the dirt, completely immobilizing him. The group of lesser demons behind the tiger felt a chill and buried their heads in the sand. I thought, this woman is terrifying. Xiaosha, I've told you this 1,000 times. I have already surrendered to the humans. I looked at the great tiger in front of me and felt a headache coming on. This was another faction from the wasteland, pure-blooded demons. Though they were fewer in number than the half-demons, they were a force to be reckoned with. They occupied the only true oasis in the entire desert, a place known as the Esoi. It even boasted its own spiritual springs. The tiger demons were few, but their cultivation levels far surpassed the half-demons. When the demon lord Xiaosao realized the war was over, he brought his thugs here to grab a piece of the pie. But his timing couldn't have been worse. Lin Ruowei and a newly empowered by Lin took him down the moment he arrived. I watched as he ranted about hard work, calling Chantan a disgrace to the demon race and a total waste. He stood there, listening to Xiaosha's scolding while surrounded by humans. Aili cut him off and corrected him, saying it wasn't about the law. It was about the alliance. Our half-demons are now the mounts for the humans. She called it being pampered or something like that. She must have learned those words recently, and Xiaosha's eyes went wide. He never imagined this half-demon king would actually turn into a full demon. I couldn't believe he would say such degrading words. He spoke with such righteousness, but being pampered by humans is an insult to any race. For a demon, it's the ultimate humiliation. He shouted that Aili had fed her dignity as a wolf demon to the dogs. Wrong again, because now I'm the one. I'm the dog now, Aili said, wagging her tail with pride. It's a shame she's a half-demon with a wolf's head and a human body. Otherwise, she really would look just like a dog. Believe me, there's nothing wrong with being a dog. I learned to bark the day I saw my predecessor in action. I think you should probably learn how to meow right about now. Seriously, you won't regret it, but if it weren't for Bai Lin. She was holding on to him with a death grip. Xiaosha looked like he couldn't wait to break free and kick the door down. I watched Aili shut her mouth, even though she had fled the demon realm for this place. Even though she had lived a miserable, scraping existence in the desert. It was true, the glory of a god is still the glory of a god, and the pride of the demon race remained. Could that pride really be defiled by mere humans? I stared into Xiaosha's eyes. He swore he would never yield, and seeing that, Aili immediately lost all interest. Once a demon gets used to the good life, there is no going back to the old ways. There was no turning back now. I looked at Xiaosha, whose face was flushed with rage on this day. The senior provides his demon beasts with spiritual meat. He even granted them the blood of a phoenix. Since hatching, I had never met anyone as kind as the senior. This big cat dared to question him? It was absolutely detestable. I made sure to remember his face. He knew deep down that he couldn't escape right now. After all, Bai Lin had actually recovered from her injuries. A few days ago, she had even broken through her bottleneck. She was already drawing in a lightning tribulation, but the timing wasn't right yet. He could only wait, hoping the demons of his own clan would eventually arrive. Stop staring. Hurry up and bring the seeds from every family, Bai Lin commanded as she looked around, leaving the crowd standing there in a daze. Terrified, the spectators who had gathered to watch the show heard her words, and they scrambled back as fast as they could. They ran to their original sex just to grab those seeds. Master, Hukingen, was not influenced by Xiaosha at all. The crocodile's words still echoed in my mind. Don't overthink it. In the future, they would realize that this economy would bring massive benefits. I had to make sure the senior was properly compensated. Bai Lin looked at us. She didn't know what to say for a moment. She just hadn't realized it yet. I couldn't comfort her then, so I wondered, what should we do with that young lady? Everyone thought the crocodile's story was just a tale, but it was real. They knew that in this vast land, there were countless beasts. He even had a female confidant who had likely already reached enlightenment. It's only natural for a powerful cultivator to have multiple companions. That's just how it is. Hukingen breathed a sigh of relief. The lady the senior mentioned was so kind, she wouldn't get angry. I let out a sneeze. The crocodile, had just. I was walking down the stairs when I suddenly sneezed. Do cultivators even get colds? I muttered to myself. I shook it off and headed straight toward Cott Street. It didn't take long to reach the nearest area. I arrived at the local flower and plant market and found a shop. I stepped inside and was greeted by the owner. What are you looking for? He asked as I scanned the room. The shop specialized in high-end bonsai trees. The shelves were packed with a dazzling variety of plants. I didn't recognize a single one. I barely even know the trees on my own street. I wasn't here for the potted plants, though. I needed fertilizer. I'm here for fertilizer, I said. Just a small bag. I decided to just get straight to the point and get out. What kind? He asked. Chemical, chicken manure, or biological? We have everything in stock. He started listing organic options like bone meal and soybean cake. I felt overwhelmed. I've never worked a field in my life and knew nothing about this. Seeing my confusion, the owner realized I was a novice and recommended a compound mix. He handed me a bottle filled with colorful granules. The ingredient list was long and seemed to cover everything, so I took it. So how much? I asked. 80? 30? Fine, thanks. I paid for the purchase and grabbed a bottle of mosquito repellent too. This one's on the house, the owner said, looking at my cash. He seemed to think he'd made a killing off those $30. I walked out of the shop feeling a bit drained and wandered through the alleys. Ever since I started working, my life has been a straight line from the office to my front door. I realized I had never actually explored my own neighborhood. Even though this place is far from the city center, the shops weren't lacking at all. In fact, because there's a small village not too far away, the local market was surprisingly lively. Villagers brought their homegrown vegetables to sell, but a small, exquisite stall caught my eye. The owner was unexpectedly young, a man who looked barely out of his teens. He wore glasses and looked even younger than me, almost like a quiet student. He was hunched over his work as if he were studying for an exam. In front of him sat a beautiful glass display case. Inside was an incredibly detailed miniature landscape featuring a jagged rock formation. It was an artificial mountain, but the craftsmanship was stunning. The peaks and valleys looked completely realistic. He had used moss to simulate grass and tiny herbs to create the illusion of a vast forest. But the most impressive part was the bamboo grove. It was actually real. Up close, it looked like a real mountain range. It was truly beautiful, but everyone else just shook their heads and walked away after one look. I stepped closer to get a better view. A small smirk played at the corner of my mouth as I noticed a sign. It read, 5,000, fixed price. To be honest, high-end miniature landscapes can sell for tens of thousands. His price was actually cheap, but the people in this neighborhood clearly weren't that wealthy. I'll take it, I said, and the young man looked up with small, blinking eyes. I told him to add my contact info in case I wanted a custom piece in the future. He nodded, though a trace of regret still lingered on his face. It felt like he was selling his soul for half its worth. He looked like a college student who hadn't been crushed by the weight of society yet. I checked my phone and saw his name was Fukian. What a strange name. He carefully handed the glass case over to me with trembling hands. Please be careful, he whispered. It took me over a month to finish. Don't worry, I've got it, I replied. I wanted to use this ethereal mountain landscape for my plan. It was the perfect model for the sect I imagined building, especially in the Great Desolation, where everything is just yellow dust and barren land. Establishing a sect through cultivation. Chapter 23. Sacrifice one person to save the world. At the summit of Mount Akshuan, Wujian is struck by lightning. Almost every cultivator in the Daoxian sect noticed the anomaly and looked up at the sky. They had never seen thunder like this. Usually it was cyan, red, purple, or blue. But the heavenly thunder swirling over Wu Jianfeng was a terrifying blackish red. A heavy, luminous breath began to gather. It constantly accumulated at the mountain peak, making everyone wonder, what is that strange thunder? Is it an elder passing through a lightning tribulation? That's the Supreme Elder's dojo. Could he have achieved a breakthrough? But this didn't feel right. The previous thunder didn't look anything like this. The energy loomed over Wu Jianfei. The entire mountain peak had been flattened and covered with a massive amount of spirit stones. In the center stood a massive cylindrical pillar. 3 scarlet characters were carved into it, glowing under the reflection of the lightning. The communication platform shone a bright, bloody red. It was a demon sacrifice. The entire platform was filled with vibration technique boards operating in secret. It was consuming an astonishing amount of spiritual energy. Blackish purple lightning strikes the small altar repeatedly, hitting the space below it. I looked up, covered in blood, thinking, the people have suffered far too much. The crowd around me was sturdy, and they rushed over to help the old man. But I, Lu Yang, pushed them aside and leaned heavily against the pillar. My blood kept flowing, almost reaching the mark. Always almost. For 10 years, I've been searching for a breakthrough here. Every year I come close, but I never quite grasp it. Extraordinary means are required, and suddenly, black and red flames erupt from my body. The blood evaporates in the heat, stripping away my disguise to reveal my true form. To their shock, my features are extraordinarily delicate. I look almost androgynous, a young woman no one would suspect. Who would believe this girl is actually a 100,000-year-old monster? I demanded to know, where's the 7th elder? It's been a month. The 6th elder trembled, not daring to mention that the 7th elder fell a month ago. The flames on my body flared up again, scorching the monks nearby. They groaned in agony from the heat, but they had no choice but to endure it. It was Luo Buin who acted. Who did he send to the Xuanzong faction? Of the 7 elders, only 2 are left for him to mobilize. I'm in the same boat, but I have the advantage of the inner sect's support. Almost the entire core of the Daoxian sect stands behind me. The 4th elder also left the sect a month ago to stay in the Great Desert. He recently appeared in Zondu, but like the others, he hasn't returned. He hasn't returned to the sect, and he's been writing in that book constantly. The true strength of his foundation lies within these elders, and every death is a devastating loss. The death of the 7th elder. It has crippled his power in this place. I demanded to know where Luo Buin was, only to find out he's in seclusion. Seclusion at a time like this? I was baffled that he didn't seize the chance to strike. What a careless waste. Just thinking about Luo Buin made my fists clench tight. The 6th elder went back to work, wondering if the Supreme Elder would really resort to that method. To handle everything, I seized that disciple's body and stole the identity of the person who brought him to life. All of this was to force Luo Buin to hand over the sect's authority. Luo Buin naturally refused, and that's how the struggle between us began. The mission of the Daoxian sect started then, with the Supreme Elder using a forbidden resurrection method to cheat death. the Divine Stone. It has been recovering for 10 years now. That was when I, Liu Yang, began my formal competition against Luo Buin. Luo Buin started showing signs of an impending disaster. His path is broken, but my resurrection is meant to let humanity truly feel what it means to live. I am the only one who can stop the coming catastrophe. The fate of the Daoxian sect hangs in the balance. Some in the sect believe me, others don't, but the opposition is rising, and I'll make them see the truth. Impossible. Besides, why would an elder from 100,000 years ago even care? Why worry about the sect after all this time? If I were like the others, I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't fight for resources, but since Liu Yang arrived, he's taken far too much. What will the others think? Short-sighted fools. Sacrifice is necessary for the future of our cultivators and the sect's survival. Luo Buin is a joke. He still thinks I'm just competing with the leadership. He thinks this is about power and resources. How ridiculous can he be? The sixth elder went silent, knowing half the righteous sects are already leaning toward cooperating with me. The other half is still hesitating, waiting to see how the disaster unfolds. The Great Rift is widening, threatening to tear everything apart. Lately, the spiritual tremors have become increasingly violent. Many cultivators have already been corrupted by the energy leaking from the abyss. If this is the disaster I've been warned about, then winning this fight will be harder than I ever imagined. I need to go and speak with Bai Lin immediately. If he's willing to sacrifice his own son's legacy, what would he do? To the rest of the Central Lands? He shouldn't refuse me, even if the seventh elder has a volatile temper. Those two start a fight the second they lay eyes on each other. Once I explain the gravity of the situation, I believe Bai Lin will finally understand the stakes. At least, I hope so. I'm sure Hyukingen will understand. But then I stopped. I held the sixth elder back, remembering that the seventh elder's death was caused by an accident. An accident caused by Bai Lin himself. The sixth elder froze. He remained silent for a long moment before finally mentioning the great desolation. It all leads back to that wasteland. It's highly likely that Bai Lin and the others have already joined forces. They've aligned themselves with a powerful cultivator, if I'm not mistaken. That cultivator wants Hyukingen's Dao companion, and his power is immense. Now that I think about it, the devastation the human world faced in the 21st century was total. The memory of that destruction still haunts the sixth elder's eyes. To cause such ruin and kill the seventh elder, that unknown cultivator, is likely just as strong as he is, even if the sixth elder is slightly weaker. He is a powerhouse, and he's definitely not human. I want to avoid more conflict if possible, so I might try to persuade him. In the face of the great desolation, we should be allies. Sacrificing a young woman for this is just too cruel. No, something isn't right. This whole situation is suspicious. Luo Buin, the fourth elder, abandoned the sect and went into seclusion to cultivate. The seventh elder is dead, and Liu Yang is playing a very old, dangerous game. He's a 100,000-year-old immortal, and his time is running out before the calamity strikes. He doesn't have the luxury of discussing morality with these ants. For him, this has to be settled once and for all. I need to avoid trouble, but then I remember the chaos in the realm of 10,000 demons. The Yuan Yao clan was completely wiped out by that new demon king. Now they're searching for a home in the northwest, where the great demon kingdoms lie. Countless small demon realms are rising up among them. The humans of the Middle Earth usually don't interfere with one another, but things changed. A century ago, a powerful new demon appeared and proclaimed himself king. He decimated 80% of the demon kingdoms in his path. In just 100 years, his rapid rise shocked every cultivator in Middle Earth. He was so ruthless that even a legendary force, like the Yuan Yao race, was utterly crushed. That happened only 3 years ago. The surviving Yuan Yao fled to Middle Earth in shame, barely clinging to life. Now they serve as mere guardian beasts for various sects. Even though the Yuan Yao live in terror of their demon king, the cultivators of Middle Earth still don't dare to underestimate them. After all, the history of the Yuan Yao lineage is just as deep and ancient as any of these great sects. I need to play the hidden cards I haven't used yet. Tell those monkeys, if they want territory, they must destroy the cultivator at the Great Peak. Then, they must bring Hyukingen to me at the 18 peaks. I can grant them 3 peaks, even though my sect is the #1 power in this land. The territory I occupy even covers the entire city of Tamaulipas. The land is the best there is, with secrets hidden beneath every peak. Each one has its own separate spiritual vein, an almost irrational level of wealth. The sect elder boasted about our resources with visible pride. But I know this move is a massive gamble. Once I have the Dao Marrow in my hands, I can reclaim everything I've lost. Time waits for no one, and I have to move fast. After Liu Yang finished speaking, he sat back down beneath the demon subjugation altar. If I could, I would have taken action myself already. It's a shame I can't leave this altar, especially with the Guban interference limiting my power. The sixth elder watched Liu Yin return to his meditation and realized his role. He had to protect him. He was the only high-level force Liu Yin had left. Liu Yin won't let him leave for Mexico unless it becomes absolutely necessary. The great elder and the second elder disappeared into the sea of calamity long ago and never returned. The third elder is indifferent, and the fifth elder is bedridden with severe injuries. Despite our reputation as the top righteous sect, we are actually incredibly weak. Now, they're even tearing each other apart from the inside. The only reason this remains a land for humanity is because we keep it that way. The sixth elder helps me not just for karma, but for the future. He wants to make the profound sect great again. He's thinking ahead. If sacrificing Hyukingen is all it takes, it's a small price to pay. I can make the sect prosper and defy karma at the same time. It's pure profit. If the profound sect rises again, the resources we'll control will be endless. Everything will be within my reach. I quietly pulled out a bottle of shimmering purple water. I added a single scoop of the compound fertilizer into the liquid. The mixture turned into a vibrant, colorful swirl as it dissolved. I watched until it was completely integrated into the water. I gave it one last shake, hoping this would actually work. If a simple pointer can become a real laser and batteries can release thunder, then this fertilizer has to be the real deal too. I've studied this glass box for a month and still don't fully get its secrets. Sometimes, I just have to trust my gut and take the leap. I grabbed the spray bottle and walked over to the glass enclosure. Looking down, I saw the tiny people inside were still busy working. They were using miniature spells to dig holes and plant spiritual seeds one by one. To be honest, this doesn't look like cultivating immortality at all. It feels more like simple farming. Watching these cultivators every day has completely stripped away the charm of the craft. Until they reach true immortality, these people are just pathetic. They struggle and toil, hoping to reach enlightenment one day. They are truly tied to the earth, and finally, night fell. The tiny people finished planting the various spiritual seeds. The elder looked exhausted, and Hyukingen's face was pale. The continuous circulation of magic power had taken its toll. Planting these spiritual objects had drained their auras completely. They ate thin slices of spiritual meat to slowly recover their strength. I looked at them and thought, all right, time to start. I aimed the spray bottle at the glass box and gave them a warning. Find some cover, it's about to rain, I muttered. My words left them completely perplexed, looking up at the clear sky. It didn't look like rain was coming at all. The last time it rained in the Great Desolation was 300 years ago. But right then, Bailing noticed the air growing heavy and thick. The sky inside the box began to shift and darken. The roof of their world was suddenly covered in thick clouds. A thick mist swallowed everything in just a few moments. The crowd woke up and quickly scattered. The sky began to shimmer with a deep blue hue. Then came a flash of bright red, and the sky let out a dull roar. It seemed like the sky-covering senior could summon wind and rain with a mere wave of his hand. Is there really anything special about this? Eiley asked, looking completely bewildered. For any cultivator, summoning wind and rain is basic. It's a very normal thing for a standard practitioner. Even a weakling can use a spring rain spell to condense moisture from the air. A slightly more powerful cultivator would do more. They would transport water from a great distance. But this senior is on a different level. He is truly different. The sky-covering senior is a monster. He uses raw energy to create moisture. He created enough humidity to cover their entire world. To do this across the Great Desolation is unheard of. The senior's spiritual energy can no longer be measured. Calling it immense doesn't even come close to the truth. Eiley's words left me in a daze. I was standing there, completely stunned by the scale of it all. Even if it rains in our Great Desolation, you usually can't even see it. Normal rain won't do a single thing for spiritual herbs. The poverty of the Great Desolation isn't about a lack of water, it's the land itself. The soil has no energy, so what is he using? Even Balan looks confused. However, the situation is becoming increasingly difficult to grasp. At the same time, the realization of what's happening begins to sink in. Back in the Middle Earth, my vision finally cleared. The Immortal's explanation shattered everything I thought I knew. Tianqian, having just returned to the Great Desolation, stared up at the sky. He rubbed his eyes in pure disbelief at the sight above him. Could it be that the person inside that house is something more? A spiritual vein must be hidden deep within the sky-covering senior's body. Regardless, this spiritual energy is far too exaggerated for any one person. Not far from the half-demon tribe, several cultivators from the 10,000 Spirits sect gathered. They stood on a giant rock, watching the half-demons from a distance with suspicion. The creators of the Great Desolation have already planted all the spiritual seeds. I wondered, what the hell are they trying to do? It's either a trap or they're after the spiritual grass. This is the lowest level of the Great Desolation. They rely on corpse fertilizer just to survive. It should be impossible for high-level spiritual items to even exist here, let alone sprout. It's beyond strange. The sect master of the 10,000 Spirits can't wrap his head around it. He's watching exactly what Balan is trying to pull, but Elder Sun just stood there, unfazed. I thought, Balan is at least a nascent soul cultivator. Is it really wise to offend him? Elder Sun smirked, claiming the sect master didn't know the truth about 20 years ago. Balan suffered devastating injuries and fled to the Great Desolation. Those wounds never healed. His current breakthrough is a lie. It's nothing more than a final, dying flash of light. Hearing that, the 10,000 Spirits sect master finally felt his chest loosen. The gap between a golden core and a nascent soul is usually a mountain. But if he's just a late-stage golden core, they have nothing to fear. This wasteland was once the battlefield of ancient great demons. Countless demon skeletons are buried beneath this dirt, though most have rotted away. Unexpectedly, those half-demons dug up a few bones that haven't vanished yet. If we refine those into corpse fertilizer for the Middle-earth sects, we'll be rich. The sect master's heart began to pound with pure greed. If we pull this off, the 10,000 Spirits sect might finally join the Orthodox Alliance. Those half-demons stumbled onto this treasure over 10 days ago. It's a complete waste for trash like them to have discovered it first. That treasure should be ours, and that sect master is just playing tough. Without our corpse fertilizer, nothing grows in this great desolation, not even a blade of spirit grass. Even if you plant them upside down, they won't take root. I'm certain that in less than 30 days, the land will be back here begging me for help. Elder Sun is right. It doesn't matter if they try to cultivate this wasteland. They might have joined forces suddenly, but they just fought a brutal battle with the half-demons and lost everything. Look at that scorched earth. Their spirit veins are tapped out and their resources are gone. They'll definitely come crawling back to the master, begging for food. Spirit grass simply cannot grow in this wild, dead soil. Suddenly, the sect master looked up and felt a drop on his head. As if answering his arrogance, the sky opened up and a heavy rain began to pour. The horizon turned pitch black as the storm took over. I thought, this is impossible. It hasn't rained here in 300 years. Elder Sun looked just as confused as the rain drenched the dry earth. Then his eyes nearly popped out of his head as he stammered, What is that?" Right there, beneath his feet, a sprout of spirit grass was breaking through the dirt. At a speed visible to the naked eye, life broke through the earth. Everyone turned their heads toward the half-demon clan in shock. I watched as the desolate wasteland of the half-demons began to shift. Spirit herbs sprouted wildly, while towering trees surged from the soil. In just a few minutes, the entire territory was completely transformed. The dead zone turned into a lush, green paradise before our eyes. A massive surge of spiritual energy began to converge on the clan. For a moment, the entire half-demon settlement was unrecognizable. It had become a spectacle that shook the very heavens and the earth. "Impossible. This is impossible," Elder Sun muttered like a man possessed. He pointed a trembling finger at a spirit tree that had just matured. It was a species that shouldn't even exist in this climate. That's the 1,000 spirit tree. It's impossible for it to grow here. And that yellow willow would take 100 years just to bear fruit. The disciples of the 10,000 Spirits sect heard Elder Sun's screams. The old man looked like his entire world was crumbling. I thought, how is this possible? It defies every law of nature. But the proof was right there, blooming in front of our eyes. It was time for him to admit his mistake while he still could. His precious corpse fertilizer was now nothing more than useless dirt. Now, it's time to see if this control system actually works. Looking at the half-demons, it's clear they desperately need fertilizer. Chapter 25, The Second of Life. Good. No need to run anymore. I finished and put away the spray bottle, watching the vitality return to their land. I nodded with satisfaction, thinking, now this finally looks like a blessed land. Before, this place was a disgrace, unfit for any kind of cultivation. Because of my influence, the effect only reached 1,000 meters around the target. Even with the sprayer, I could only affect the immediate surroundings. Fortunately, the altitude wasn't too high, or my range would be even more limited. Otherwise, when I used the laser pointer on the 7th Elder, I might have hit someone else. I stopped flying for a moment to catch my breath. Since I only recently broke through, my internal aura hasn't fully stabilized yet. Flying back and forth around the half-demon territory had left my energy a bit messy. The reach of my power was still stuck at that 1,000-meter limit. That meant the mist falling from the spray bottle was concentrated in one zone. It only covered the area directly beneath my flight path. But the half-demon land is vast, and I needed to spread this compound fertilizer everywhere. I realized I'd have to keep moving if I wanted total coverage. The humidity rose so sharply that it started raining across the entire wasteland. Outside the half-demon borders, it was just ordinary rain, but here, it was a miracle. "Senior, is there anything else you need me to do?" "No need, just rest well for a while." I looked at the glass box with satisfaction, watching the green finally replace that desolation. The heavy rain had carved out several new rivers across the land. But these rivers had no source, and I knew they wouldn't last long without one. To be honest, I didn't expect this compound fertilizer to be this powerful. Everywhere the water touched, plants were surging upward at an incredible rate. I glanced at the decorative mountain model I had sitting next to the box. Ugh, it's way too big. If I drop this in now, it'll crush everything. It would definitely hit Hyukingen, and I really should have bought a smaller one. Maybe if Hyukingen's cultivation gets a bit higher, he can handle placing this mountain himself. I reached behind the glass box and noticed a mysterious new button had appeared. It allowed me to zoom the field of vision in and out, though the radius stayed fixed on Hyukingen. Anything beyond 1,000 meters from him was still shrouded in that thick mist. The zoom only changed my perspective. The world inside didn't actually shrink. I could also slide my view left and right as long as I stayed within that kilometer range. This let me observe every little detail of the half-demon territory with precision. I figured that as long as Hyukingen keeps getting stronger and advancing his rank, this glass box might unlock even more functions for me to use. Then, a crazy idea suddenly hit me. If I can take things out of the box, what about Hyukingen? Could I actually pull Hyukingen out of the box? The moment the thought crossed my mind, it took root and wouldn't let go. So far, everything I've taken out of that box has been inanimate. I haven't tested it with a living being yet. I need to find the right moment to try, because if it works, the implications are terrifying. I have to be cautious. What if I accidentally pull out some ancient, world-ending monster? With our current technology, I'm not sure humanity could even stop something like that. Hyukingen mentioned a girl named Xiao Xiao. She's only at the 8th level of chi refining. Should I try with her? No. If something goes wrong, she'll die instantly. Even if she's nearly 100 years old, to a half-demon, she's still just a child. My phone suddenly buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. My package had arrived. Inside the box, Xiao Xiao looked around at the world in complete shock. 15 minutes ago, this place was a barren wasteland. Now, it was a lush oasis. Vibrant spiritual herbs were sprouting from the ground everywhere she looked. Wild medicinal plants burst through the soil, and massive trees hung heavy with fruit. Every single leaf and fruit was dripping with spiritual energy. The aura rising from the herbs began to thicken and pool in the air. It became so concentrated that it felt almost heavy. In her entire life, she had never breathed in an aura this dense. The sheer intensity of the power actually made her feel lightheaded for a moment. This place was a blessed land now, rivaling the world's most sacred ley lines. A total transformation, completed in just 15 minutes right before my eyes. Wherever that young girl, Xiao Xiao, walked, blessed rain fell from the heavens. I started to wonder, is this real, or have I fallen into an illusion? In the entire central province, only the War Elixir sect comes close to this power. Even the Holy Maiden of the Tianlin sect can't force growth this aggressively. When spirit demons try to force spiritual plants to grow, they have to set up massive arrays and gather endless resources. They sacrifice living beings and irrigate the soil with spiritual water, all just to generate a fraction of this spiritual energy. They have to be incredibly precise with every single step. They even sacrifice their own blood essence just to help the plants. And even then, the growth is agonizingly slow. But this defies everything I know about the laws of cultivation. If the Holy Maiden is considered a genius for her skills, then what does that make the girl standing right in front of me? I could almost laugh. My entire worldview is collapsing. Compared to what I'm seeing here, every other miracle looks pathetic. Even the human players are standing there, completely stunned. They look like they're trapped in a dream they can't wake up from. Sky covering senior, this is terrifying, even for me. It's pushing the limits of what an old man like me can handle. My legs are already shaking from pure, unadulterated fear. I've seen the senior's terrifying, destructive power before. But this is something else entirely. This method of making every living thing bloom as if it were eternal spring shows his bottomless depth. Since ancient times, it has always been easier to destroy than to repair. Anyone can cause massive destruction. But creating spiritual life? Making it sprout from the soil in the blink of an eye? Some of these spiritual plants are already hundreds of years old. Balin touched Hyukingen's head, his hand trembling. I tried my best to suppress the rising fear in my heart. Is this truly what the senior is capable of? I thought he might just help us keep the frostgrass alive. I never imagined a simple rain would bring such a desolate world to life. He transformed the entire half-demon tribe into a blessed land. Damn it, I suddenly realized I should have collected more of that water. If I had more of that rain, I could have matured the crops myself. I stared at the spiritual herbs covering the ground like a carpet. The rain had already been swallowed up by the soil and these spiritual things. How could I have been so stupid and forgotten to collect that water? Damn it, asking the senior for more help now would be pushing my luck. But then, Hyukingen stepped forward and said, "Master, I saved some." He saw Balin's regretful face and pulled out a storage bag with a proud look. He was the one who understood best. He knew the power of that rain, so he had gathered it in advance. He had nearly an entire tank's worth, and Balin looked relieved. With this, we could take these spiritual stones to Zontu. We could finally trade for some ammunition and supplies. In the great desert, no one refines pills or repairs broken magical artifacts. Aili walked over alone, a smug smile playing on her lips. She stopped right in front of Xiaosa. Seeing Xiaosa's terrified expression only made her feel more satisfied. She smirked and asked, "How is it? You've never seen anything like this, have you?" Xiaosa finally snapped out of his daze, snorted coldly, and looked away. The person the half-demons obey, he might actually be the real deal. I couldn't take it anymore, whether you believe it or not. The truth is the senior is a benevolent god. If he likes us half-demons, maybe he'll like your race too. We're all brothers in this great desert, and Aili wants to help everyone. How about you come and be a little cat for the senior? Aili rubbed her palms together, her eyes sparkling with joy. She had learned this trick from Hegel. That sky-covering senior seems to be a man of refined tastes. He seems to really like fluffy things. He even visits those young fox girls just because of their tails. Don't even think about it. Xiaosa is a proud warrior. She is the princess of the demon realm, only facing a temporary setback. Xiaosa stood stunned, and the tiger demons behind her were just as shocked. Aili pulled a massive chunk of demonic beast meat from her storage bag. An irresistible aroma began to waft toward Xiaosa. It was dripping with abundant spiritual energy. The quality was easily on par with high-grade spiritual stones. Pure, high-quality power. She sighed at the meat and said, I'm actually getting a bit tired of eating this. The senior is so good to us that we have to change our diet constantly. Xiaosa's eyes nearly popped out of her head. Even in the demon realm, she had never tasted anything like this. It was pure demonic beast meat. And now she was telling me she was tired of it? As if to confirm Eileen's words, I looked over at the other half-demons. They had already gathered around a massive slab of spiritual meat. They were devouring it ravenously, while I sat there thinking about my own situation. I occupied an oasis of spiritual land, yet I lived day to day with barely any resources. Compared to these half-demons, I was nothing but a beggar. The last time I saw them, this group was absolutely miserable. They were practically begging for scraps back then. Eileen sliced off a piece of the meat and held it up. She brushed it gently against Xiaosa's cheek. Xiaosa's instincts took over and she lunged for a bite. But Eileen pulled it back and said, think about your clan. Think about your kin. Even if you're willing to suffer, are they? Eileen's words were like a sharp dagger stabbing straight into Xiaosa's chest. Xiaosa looked back at the two tiger demons, whose eyes hadn't left that meat for a second. She realized that since leading her clan here, she hadn't given them a single good day. Overwhelmed with guilt, Xiaosa whispered, fine, we'll talk in private. Eileen gave a knowing smile and led Xiaosa away. They disappeared behind a large tree, and all I heard was a soft meow. What? Louder, I can't hear you. Meow, please, don't do that. They'll hear us. If Xiaosa had surrendered her dignity, it was only to save her kin from losing theirs. She couldn't let her clan hear this. She needed to remain a warrior in their eyes. In their minds, she was still the proud princess of the demon realm. But here she was, looking like a house cat, head bowed and on the verge of tears. Eileen knew she had pushed far enough and said, fine, I'll go tell them. With those words, Eileen tossed the piece of spiritual meat she was holding. It landed right in front of Xiaosa as Eileen walked away without looking back. Xiaosa collapsed. Her entire body slumped against the ground. She finally broke down and cried, feeling like she had lost the one thing that mattered. Her pride as a member of the demon race was gone. She had taken human form and could never return to the demon realm now. Tainted by the breath of humans, she would be an outcast forever. Watching this from the shadows, Hu Qingyun clenched his fists tight. The blue veins on his arms were bulging with suppressed rage. Master, I really want to step in right now. He looked like he wanted to give Eileen a brutal beating, and Bailing looked just as livid. I never imagined Eileen would take things this far. I didn't realize she could be this twisted. I mean it. That half-breed scum should really just go report everything to the senior. Bye. She finally gave up, and Hu Qingyun abandoned the idea of beating Eileen. After all, Eileen is the only one who can communicate with me directly. He also knows that the police aren't the only ones involved here. I really do like them, and while half-breeds are good, they aren't the best. Those fluffy curls, and now that a real demon clan has arrived, with children even fluffier than the rest, I'm going to love them even more. For now, they can only accept my blessings unilaterally. If they could actually enjoy the city, it would be a different story. Showing a little goodwill toward me would be a smart move. Chapter 26. Imitating a cat's meow. Achoo. I received a package and sneezed. Since I started relaxing lately, it seems like I'm sneezing more and more. I didn't pay it much mind, though, and moved the incubator into the house. I sat down and carefully opened the package. It's basically a high-tech incubator. It's the size of a microwave and comes with preset modes. There are settings for chicken eggs, duck eggs, and even goose eggs. I can even adjust the settings manually if I need to. I finished reading through the instructions carefully. I plugged it in, turned it on, and placed the stone egg inside. Honestly, I'm not sure if this will work since it's basically a rock now, but it's worth a shot. It only cost me a bit of money anyway. Ordinary objects from my world usually change. Once they enter that miniature realm, they take on miraculous effects when I drop them into their kingdom. There's no reason to keep myself in suspense. I randomly selected the chicken egg incubation mode and let it run. Just then, I heard Hu Qingyun's voice calling out to me. This was a new ability she unlocked after her cultivation leveled up. Within a short distance, she can contact me at any time. I quickly leaned over to the glass box to see what was happening. I saw Eileen standing there with a look of pure smugness on her face. She was wagging her tail so happily she looked more like a fawning dog. Hu Qingyun said, Senior, since Eileen knows you like fluffy things, she just brought you a litter of cubs. She really hopes you like them, Hu Qingyun added. Eileen's tail started wagging even faster than before. Fluffy cats? Since when did I ever say I liked fluffy things? But before I could even process that, Eileen didn't give the crocodile any time to react. She went straight over to greet Xiaobo. Meanwhile, Osai approached Hu Qingyun. The crocodile took a closer look and thought, this is a Baigu, right? A pure demon, not a half-demon. Pure-blooded demons have two distinct states. One is their current, natural body. The other is the human form they take after consuming transformation grass. A pure demon in human form won't show a single animalistic trait. They look completely like a person, whereas a half-demon is born that way. Half-demons are different. They keep obvious features like tails or paws. Then there are demonic beasts, which stay in beast form and are basically what you find in the wild. They don't use magic, relying instead on supernatural talents that are unusually powerful. Xiaoshao arrived in front of Hu Qingyun looking incredibly worried. She looked up at the sky, took a deep breath, and let out a soft meow. Actually, Balan had already given up on trying to stop the elders from returning. When the elders who escaped together heard she was joining the humans, their reaction was violent. Xiaosa had to return alone because what Eili promised was just too tempting. Now those elders are practically hunting her down, and I just hope that expert can stop them. The elders were closing in, right outside the glass box. I stood there stunned for a full minute, unable to process it. I thought to myself, what do you think? Should we really do this? Hua Qingyun asked if we should raise them, since these beast demons are so common. I even considered using the camera to track them through the mud. Under my management, the entire land of Dawan had finally connected. Humans, demons, and half-demons all together. It was once unimaginable. I decided right then, I'll raise them. I have plenty of leftovers every day, and the glass box is huge anyway. Adding a few more mouths to feed wouldn't hurt a thing. Hearing my decision, Hua Qingyun finally looked relieved. Maybe being a pet for a powerful senior like me isn't so bad. It certainly wasn't anything to be ashamed of. I told Xiaosa to wait because I wanted to give her something. She looked confused, but she waited patiently for my next move. Meanwhile, that crocodile in the box was getting a bit bigger. I started searching frantically around my house, thinking, where is it? I remembered the crocodile still had that longing for a better life. Back when I first moved in and rented this place, I saw stray cats everywhere and bought some cheap cat treats and sausages. I was looking for that specific sausage. The crocodile had ended up eating those too. With no other choice, I went to the fridge and found some leftover dried fish. I stared at the fish, its eyes wide open, and walked back to the box. I gave it a sniff. It had a powerful fishy stench that cats usually love. Since tigers are basically just big cats, I figured this would work and grabbed a piece. I lined up my shot over the glass box and carefully lowered it in. Down below, Xiaosa looked up at the sky, her heart pounding with tension. It was her first time ever being face-to-face with a being of my caliber. She had no idea what kind of temperament a legendary figure like me possessed. Suddenly, the sky and the earth seemed to merge into one. Everything went dark as my golden hand reappeared through the clouds. As my giant hand descended, Xiaosa began to tremble uncontrollably. She felt that if she even thought about resisting, she'd be crushed instantly. To me, she was nothing more than a mosquito to be swatted. She shot a panicked look over at the Black Wolf. The Black Wolf, however, didn't seem surprised at all. He had already accepted that my power was beyond comprehension. He knew this senior could cover the entire sky on a whim. They both watched in awe as my giant golden hand slowly lowered a gift. I placed a piece of the dried fish right in front of her. I gave Xiaosa a light tap with my finger before pulling my hand back. She felt like her bones were about to crumble under the weight of my golden touch. But the warmth of my finger actually helped calm the terror in her heart. She stood there frozen as I withdrew from the box. Is that a shark loin from the Sea of Calamity? The Black Wolf stammered. Xiaosa finally snapped out of it, staring at the massive fish I had left behind. Then, she noticed a group of figures approaching from the distance. She squinted and realized it was the elders who had been chasing her. They were all stopping in their tracks, staring up at the sky in shock. They looked like they were questioning their entire existence as the light snow fell. Xiaosa called out to the other tigers. The senior said, "This is for us." She pointed at the giant Sea of Calamity fish sitting on the ground. The pungent scent and the massive spiritual energy immediately hooked every demon there. Even the youngest tiger cubs couldn't tear their eyes away from the feast.